Good morning. This is your wake-up call.
The year is 2021. It is no longer safe to transmit information. Phones, computers, and satellites are all vulnerable, cryogenically preserved.
Okay, guys, memory clearance.
Genetically enhanced.
How's the picture?
Pretty ugly.
Very funny, very funny.
GR-44, do you read me? At the end of the mission, he became completely unresponsive.
Inside the machine is a man.
Did you really think the Pentagon would allow the regeneration of dead soldiers?
Stop the girl. Shoot if you have to.
I can carry nearly 80 gigs of data in my head.
I had to dump a chunk of long-term memory.
You had to dump a chunk of what?
My childhood.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
John Woo and Dolph Lundgren, baby. Teaming up. Join the sleaze.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for over 3 years. There's something like 70-plus bonus episodes, maybe even coming up on 80 now, waiting for you, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre movies, which it looks like they're going to start coming out again.
That's exciting.
Which is nice. So, again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast if you want any of those episodes. And speaking of which, we did have some people make the jump. This week we have Joseph, Drew Mascarelli, B, Dylan, Anton Person Flaguer. Brutal. You guys got to take it easy on me with some of these names. We have, coming in at the $10 a month, we have Ben, who's going to be joining us for the virtual screening that we do. We're going to be doing,
nice.
Usually once a month. We do one for the $10 patrons where we watch a movie live with them. And this month, because it's Dolph month, we're going to be doing Dolph. So Ben's going to be joining us for I think on the 24th of June, I think we're going to be watching Joshua Tree with you guys, which is a movie where Dolph Lundgren, he's a former race car driver turned exotic supercar hustler who gets framed for murder. It's a very absurd premise, and it's a lot of fun. So that's what we're going to be watching with you guys on the 24th. Thanks for Ben for doing that. And also, we're not even done there. We've also got Anthony Hera, and last but not least, Dan Stalkup. So thanks so much to all of you guys for signing up this week. Hope you guys are enjoying all those bonus episodes. That's the one plug for the week. The other plug is, as always, Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, please scroll down to the very bottom right now and give us a good old rating and review down there. I know you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts. I see the stats, and it helps us climb the ranks of our iTunes every time you guys do that.
Yes, please.
That's the other plug. And the last plug, as always, is merch. If you guys like the poster art that local horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the show, I like that we get to shout out Trevor Henderson on every episode of the show now.
He deserves
I'm sure he
it.
appreciates that. He's a great artist, and he did awesome art for us, and he listened through every annoying little redraft that I sent him, being like, can you touch that? Can you fix that? And the art can now be put on anything you want. A sweatshirt, a t-shirt, a pillow, a mug, a notebook, whatever you can think of, you can probably get the Sleazoids art on. That link can be found in the description or at sleazoidspodcast.com for those interested. But, that's it. That's the intro.
We did it.
Welcome back. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back to the third week officially of Dolph Month, where we have been celebrating all things Dolph Lundgren. We've been exclusively talking about movies he's been in. We've been going chronologically, starting with his first films like Rocky IV and He-Man Masters of the Universe and Punisher. And, we're now entering kind of like the early 90s to mid 90s kind of action trash that he was doing, that, a lot of it is, better than its reputation. And that was partially why we wanted to do Dolph Month entirely, is, you mentioned Dolph Lundgren to a lot of people, and you kind of get this, opinion of him that he's just some, if you can't afford Arnold Schwarzenegger, you can't afford Sylvester Stallone, he's who you went to. And I think that reputation of him does a big disservice to both him as a performer and a lot of the films that he was in. So we're very excited this week to have a returning guest calling in from the Pod About List show. He's been on once before talking great horror comedies with us. I believe we were talking about Killer Clowns from Outer Space and Brain Damage, which was the double feature he selected for us last time. We have joining us Cameron. Cameron, how you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me back on. I'm excited.
No, I mean, well, it was an absolute necessity to have you back on because as I was talking to you kind of before we started here, I was looking for people to talk about these films with us, and I couldn't find any of my mutuals who had both of these movies, on their Letterboxd rated higher than like a 2.5 or like a 3. There were some who liked one or liked the other one or, that kind of deal, but there was no one who liked both of these movies.
It's and I was very like, surprising to me. They seem like they go very hand in hand. Like it seems like it would be hard to like one and not like another. But when you told me that originally, I looked on Letterboxd too, and I saw the same thing, and I was very confused by that.
Yeah, so I was very, I was like, damn, Cameron is our guy for these picks, and I think that this pairing, ultimately we were going through a lot of Dolph stuff, just chronologically, as is. Like, I think 2 weeks ago would have been, the first official episode of the month. We had special guest Ethan Vespi on. We talked about his first leading roles. We talked about He-Man, Masters of the Universe from 1987, which is, kind of an unfortunate one for him because, he himself, didn't really know what he was doing. And
doesn't seem like the direction was very helpful either.
Yeah, and friend of Bryan Singer's pedophile ring parody, Gary Goddard, who directed that film, didn't really direct him to do very much either. Like, even in retrospect, he's done interviews about it. He was just like, yeah, I was kind of just there to look like the toy, and I kind of felt silly and embarrassed, and no one really told me to do anything otherwise. So, kind of not a great... start, but an important part in, what would be Dolph Lundgren's eventual career, because also, he would get cast as the lead in The Punisher, another sort of geek property that they wanted to turn into, a modern genre picture in the way that they exist at the time. And that one was much more successful, directed by Mark Goldblatt, the guy who directed Dead Heat and, known for editing some of the best action movies of the 80s. The dude edited Commando and Terminator. And so, much more effective for Dolph there, where he got to play kind of like, he's still stiff, but he got to play kind of like this angry killing machine. So that kind of performance suited that. And then last week, for the bonus listeners exclusively, we kind of shifted over into Dolph trying to expand outside of that stiffness as an actor. He did Dark Angel with Craig R. Baxley, who directed Stone Cold, and Showdown in Little Tokyo with Mark L. Lester, who was the director of Commando. And both films were him trying to be kind of like in these genre-bending buddy comedies. Dark Angel has him fighting off a alien from space who shoots CDs out of his arm and slits people's throats with them.
Yeah, pretty wild.
Showdown in Little Tokyo has Dolph Lundgren, the last Japanese man on Earth, taking down the Yakuza in Little Tokyo. And there literally is a showdown, where he's in, full, he's got the headband, he's got the Japanese garb, he's got a katana, he's in the middle of a, wet neon American city street, and he's, having a big old showdown. So
yeah, everything I learned about the Japanese culture, I learned from Dolph Lundgren. So thank you, Dolph. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, and it was also fun watching him do a buddy cop movie just with Brandon Lee.
Yeah,
R.I.P. It would have been nice to see Brandon Lee in more films, and watching him and Dolph, they get to do some pretty athletic action, both of them in that film, even though Brandon Lee, he's a little bit more, a lot more flips going on from Brandon.
A little more agile.
Dolph's a little too big for that kind of stuff. But either way, fun to watch him expand into buddy cop and do kind of comedy and romance and a bunch of other things. So we've been tracing his career chronologically up to this point, and the reason I'm describing this, so again, that episode, bonus listeners, sleazoidspodcast.com, that was last week's episode. But the reason I'm going through this is because we are now at a different phase of Lundgren's career. Every episode I plotted out here, it was like we are at a different stage in the Dolph Man. And in here, we got to see him do sci-fi actioners where he gets to play the villain, and he gets to, go back to kind of what he was doing a little bit in Rocky IV, where he got started as the antagonist, and he has a very commanding physical presence in that film. But here, he got to expand his acting chops and do two very different kinds of villain roles here, where Universal Soldier, directed by Roland Emmerich from 1992, is the one we're going to be talking about, where he gets to do go back a little bit to that killing machine aspect, where, he's a Vietnam soldier who's been reanimated in the future to be a super soldier. So you get a little bit of that, but the soldier he was prior to being reanimated was an absolute maniacal freak, racist, murderous monster, and Dolph really gets to choose some of the scenes when he gets to get back into that mode. Jamie, I think, mentioned that it reminded him a little bit of Apocalypse Now. He gets to go Apocalypse Now mode a little bit.
He goes Brando mode for a little bit. Yeah, definitely.
And then we're going to be pairing that, obviously, with Johnny Mnemonic from 1995, directed by Robert Longo, and obviously written by the father of cyberpunk, William Gibson. And in that film, Dolph is, he's not a huge presence in the film, but I don't know what copy of the film you watched, Karen, but I watched the Japanese cut, which has more Kitano and Dolph in it. And
I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, you can only find it, unfortunately, on DVD. But there is so I watched kind of like a subpar quality version of the film.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because basically the only stuff that they cut was more stuff with Kitano and few second splices here and there of violence, a lot of which is Dolph, tearing, really stabbing people and watching him twist the knife around and stuff like that, and just go a little bit more psychotic and have a couple more lines.
I ended up watching both versions. One of them, the Japanese version, I ended up kind of skipping through just to see what the main differences were. But what I could tell, and we'll go into more detail, is it seemed like they just wanted to get rid of a lot of the Japanese dialogue so that they could, I think more easily advertise it to Americans, because a lot of it that they cut out is just like the parts where Keanu speaks Japanese to get a certain upgrade that you don't really see in the American version, and then there's a ton of Kitano that's been cut from the American version. He's basically not there. So
when I found that out, I thought that was fucking crazy, because the whole emotional core of the eventual decisions made in the climax of the film are completely hinged on the Kitano character in the Japanese cut of the film. So I've only seen the Japanese cut. So you guys, Cameron, you'll be able to walk me through some of the differences in the theatrical cut. So if there's anything that I describe that you're like, hey, what the fuck? Where did that come from? It's probably because we watched two different copies of the film. But I will say, largely, it's really only like 6 or 7 minutes of extra content. That's been added. So the broad strokes, I'm sure, will a lot of it be the same. And this film is kind of notorious in a lot of circles because I think a lot of people, think that it's, kind of absurd and silly. I think a lot of people treat it in the same way that they treat kind of like Mystery Science Theater 3000 or whatever it is that they kind of like think it's so bad it's good for some people in a way. And I was, watching this for the first time, I was kind of like, damn, I thought that was just kind of pretty solid. There's definitely some goofiness and some absurdity, but we'll get into the specifics of that. And, some of it I think is just intrinsic to the genre, and some of it I think works better than people think it does.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we'll get into all of the specifics as we break down these two films. But I think that being said, we're going to jump into it here. We are going to start off with Universal Soldier.
This mission has been canceled.
I'm giving the orders from now on. I'm gonna teach them all. Are we having fun yet?
The ultimate weapons of the future have declared war on each other. Jean-Claude Van Damme, Dolph Lundgren. Universal Soldier.
Stop, that is an order.
All right, we are talking Universal Soldier, the 1992 American science fiction action film directed by Roland Emmerich, who is a name that I don't think we've talked about Emmerich yet on the show.
No.
And he has had an interesting career of ever since basically like this movie and like Stargate, which I think is like pretty good. Ever since then, he's been chasing kind of like the PG blockbuster movie. That's kind of what he's been chasing, that dragon, and to some success, to some not success. Like I don't think Independence Day is a terrible film. I don't think his Godzilla is very good.
No, I don't. I honestly hate that one.
Yeah, I will never forgive him for that Godzilla. I honestly think that Godzilla is the only other film of his that I've seen. And like that, there's a good reason for that. So I watched that Godzilla and I was like, yeah, no, not doing this guy.
Yeah, but it made me wonder, like, where is this version of Roland Emmerich? Like, why is he not like a 90s action programmer guy?
Yeah,
who does like and again also like R-rated. Like this is like a violent film, and I think it's done well. And
he's clearly good
also.
At it.
This is, I didn't realize originally when I was putting Dolph month this month that it was also Pride month. So this is Sleazoids Pride. We're going to be talking about Roland Emmerich shooting the hell out of Jean-Claude Van Damme's ass. No one since has filmed it as lovingly, and so thank you, Roland. But that being said, for anyone who hasn't seen Universal Soldier, the very loose premise of this is that Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren, they both play Vietnam soldiers who, in kind of like the heat of a psychotic breakdown that Dolph Lundgren's character, Andrew Scott, goes through. And he basically, as Jamie mentioned, gets to go apocalypse mad psycho mode. He starts just killing civilians,
collecting their ears.
Collecting their ears and making them out of a necklace.
And he loves to make puns about the ears too. That's
he likes to talk into them. And,
like, they wouldn't listen, and he just like throws the ears in their face. And
I think he even says, "I'm all ears" at one point. I'm pretty sure.
Yes, he does. That's exactly what he says. And while literally like holding it up to the frame, just in case you missed what he was referencing. But yeah, he essentially goes crazy in Vietnam, and I like this opening that it's all shot in like it really is just like chaos. It's like rain and fire and mud and corpses everywhere. Van Damme's entire platoon, as we open, is basically either dead or hysterical, like claiming that the Sarge has, gone psycho and killed everyone, including his own men, and, again, collecting their ears for like a dog tag necklace, and screaming about traitors and how all the other soldiers just want to go home and pretend like this never happened, but it happened and it mattered. And it's basically like a meat-headed action rendition of like Brian De Palma's Casualties of War, which I don't know if you've seen, Cameron.
I have not.
It's Sean Penn and Michael J. Fox in Vietnam, and Sean Penn starts like leading the entire platoon to basically just go psychotic and say we should just start raping civilians, and it's based on like a true story. And then Michael J. Fox character eventually has to go to like a military court to rat them out and stuff like that. But it's very similar to that kind of sense of hysteria, but done through again this sort of like meat-headed action version where it's all like the sadistic mindset of these men turned into killing machines. But instead of Sean Penn doing this this very real sexual violence that took place, and De Palma using that as a larger metaphor for what America does to other countries. Here, the result is Dolph Lundgren like throws a grenade at a civilian and it like blows her arm off.
I also like that the conversation and like something like Casualties of War, it's based on the drama. They're having a lot of discussions about the philosophy of what's going on.
It's
and
a
all
philosophical
that. Whereas this
movie,
is like, well, we're just going to settle it with kicks, punches, and guns, baby. That's all we need.
Yeah, exactly. This is much more like, oh, you've seen Predator, right? Like that's like that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Well, and in this opening scene, like Van Damme is playing more kind of like the innocent puppy dog soldier who, has had his innocence ruined and wants to leave. And he confronted with, the Sarge going crazy, he tries to stop him. And it turns into, Dolph like shoots Van Damme's thigh out and chunks go everywhere. And I was like, not the man's thighs. They're so big.
Secret weapon, man. I do love that they just rip each other apart, like with the guns at the end, killing each other. It's kind of like it reminded me of Dead Heat, just with
the Dead Heat thing. Yeah,
they don't. Eventually, they die instead of just zombies destroying each other's bodies.
It's such a great like opening and introduction. Like it's so sweaty and just disgusting. Like that leg shot squib is like such a great just like first shot, just like it just squirts everywhere. And then they I think Van Damme like stabs Dolph with a bayonet and like twists it around.
Yeah.
And there's it's so just nasty and it's such a just right off the bat you're like, oh yeah, okay, these are the guys, I get it, I'm in.
And this is also this is when Dolph's character was trying to force JCVD to kill innocents, right? Because that's where he gets unlocked later on in like the next 15 minutes, because he's once again being forced to kill innocents, and that's what kind of shoots off in his brain, like, this is wrong, we need to do something else.
It's just the innocent screaming of the civilians is what triggers him to get his flashback back in the opening scene, because I don't think he's asked to kill anyone in that opening scene in the present day.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant
but the screaming definitely triggers him there. One I like too, that after he guts Dolph Lundgren and they both just shoot each other completely dead, which by the way is actually kind of a surprising opening to a film where the two movie stars confront each other and literally just kill each other in the opening scene. And in an amazing touch, their credits pop up as each actor is being zipped into the body bags, which I thought was sick.
So good. Yeah, that was a great
and
detail.
With that industrial music playing too that doesn't really come back, like this super like horror movie like clanging theme. It's like great credits.
Yep.
Yeah. I loved that. And then it's obviously cut to present day in the film 1992. So it's Nevada in 1992, where the military has basically flown in like a truck of super soldiers in to deal with a terrorist situation at the Hoover Dam, where they're brutally executing these hostages. And like a reporter pulls up to the scene to report on this, and she becomes kind of like a central character played by Ali Walker. Veronica Roberts is the character name I wrote down there. And she gets introduced like arriving late to the recording in like sneakers and like with a cigarette in her mouth and everything like that, because she's a cool reporter.
She doesn't play by the rules, but always gets the story.
You can tell that she's a cool reporter because she wears a jacket that says New York on the back for the entire movie.
Yes. Definitely. And I like too that Emmerich definitely leans into all of this stuff just being very leanly handled. Like there's like squibs and headshots of the guards and stuff like that, but he in this opening set piece especially, he wants to lean into the fact that these super soldiers, they are on the ground foot soldiers that are being controlled by this this larger brain command. And I love too that that's depicted as like this big airplane that is carrying a truck that looks like a Transformers truck almost, and it like opens up with like steam where they're keeping the cryogenic soldiers inside and then they operate them from like inside, and you just get to see Dolph and Van Damme just like rappel down literally Hoover Dam and start like in perfect unison taking down guards and stuff like that.
I love the way that Roland shoots the dam too. He captures the scale of it really well, like the wide shot of them going down, and then there's this awesome one where I think it might be both of them or just Dolph going into the entrance into the dam, and it follows him into the tunnel and all that.
It follows Dam. Yeah,
it's really cool. And I also like that they use silenced pistols to snipe the guys that are like 100 feet away. Like they're so super soldiers that they can do it with just a pistol. Thought that was an interesting little thing too. Very skilled.
Yeah, it's a nice little set piece, and I think it's elevated by the fact that they actually shot at the Hoover Dam.
Yeah,
it's really great location work, and there's like awesome low angle shots of Dolph where you can just see the entire dam taking up the entire frame in the background of him, and stuff like that. But they also want to set up that these guys are super soldiers; they can really take the hits. And there's a third guy among them who like breaks in to go and get the hostages, and he just gets like lit up by gunfire, just blood squibs going everywhere and stuff like that. And Dolph and Van Damme appear, and right when they do, they signal the guy, he gets up, and all three of them all take like these gory headshots at, you know, all of the various terrorists, and they very cleanly save all the screaming hostages, and you know, they did it with no casualties or injuries, and this is the future of warfare, these universal soldiers and doing these missions that they're doing. And it is kind of unsettling too to see that, you know, Van Damme and Dolph, who in the opening scene are, you know, trying very hard to be emotive, you know, even though not necessarily the actors are the most emotive actors on the planet, but, you know, they're trying. And in this scene, they're obviously playing, you know, more robotic kind of killing machine style characters. And interesting watching them, like the reveal that they like even just work together. That it's like Van Damme coming up with like in his tactical suit with his little eyepiece and his microphone, and then just Dolph in line right behind him, ready to go, and watching them work in perfect unison. But even then, they are remarking that like Van Damme, you know, the screaming is activating his flashbacks and his memories, and he's getting that sensitive part of himself back. And not only do they emphasize that, they also emphasize that the Dolph character, even though he's being commanded, you know, he's getting a little crazy about the killing. You know, he seems to really like the killing that they do.
Yeah.
What I love about this opening too, about the, you know, this crazy jungle scene right into this hostage situation, is that it kind of uses the fact that it's a little bit of like a knockoff. I mean, more than a little bit of a knockoff, I guess, to work to its advantage. Where like I feel like a movie that was maybe a little more insecure about, you know, ripping off Terminator or RoboCop or whatever might have a scene in between the two where they would have to like explain like, oh, we're reanimating the soldiers, we're controlling them. But this has kind of liberty to just like have this like crazy bloody thing and then just jump right into like a tactical situation, and it never really wastes all that much time on like, you know, figuring out what the mechanics of these like, you know, Unisols are. You can just kind of like, you're like, okay, I get it, it's a RoboCop, like I'm good, you know.
And even before they do the more dramatic sequences between like the scientists and the military guys going like, you know, we can't, it's immoral to do certain things and all that. They do have in the Damme sequence one of the soldiers that isn't Van Damme or Dolph, just used as a sacrifice. So it is interesting that, like, you know, they show that the military is willing to just take, you know, use these human bodies, and regardless, like now that they view them as cyborgs, they can just be like, well, just, you know, distract him with this soldier, kill him, and then the other two can do the rest of the job. There's like no humanity to it anymore because they just view them as robots.
Absolutely. Although I did like that beat reveal that the guy couldn't be killed just by the bullets, so he actually sits up and also shoots at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
They use it as like the staged thing to be like, yeah, they got him, give them some relief, and then no. But then that's the guy that they later put inside like the ice cube dumpster to like heal from his wounds, because those wounds should be like mortally wounding, you know, kind of things to his body. But you know, they're just like, well, if we put him in ice, you know, he'll just heal up. You know, it's fine. It's all good. But I do like Cameron.
Some good scenes with like Jean-Claude Van Damme just in a wide shot in a bathtub full of ice and stuff like that. It's good stuff.
Yeah. But I do like your point, Cameron, that this movie very blatantly, and at the time it was what it got criticized for, like very blatantly it steals and waters down the basic idea of the dehumanizing militarization of, you know, these characters as a basis for, you know, this sort of like genre machinery style film. It's very, very similar to what they would do in something like RoboCop. It's very similar to what they would do also in T2. I think at the time that this came out, I tried to find reviews at the time of what people didn't like about it, and I think it was like Roger Ebert said that it was like so very obviously derivative of Terminator 2, and that just really put a sour taste in his mouth in that way. And the thing that I would say just back to that is that it's, you know, it's so unpretentious about doing that.
Yeah.
That
absolutely.
That it really doesn't like matter to me at all. Like the fact that, you know, we'll get into some of the specifics of it, that there are, you know, real ideas in this movie at a certain point, but the movie honestly doesn't care about them beyond, you know, how they make, you know, Dolph and Van Damme as naked and sweaty and entertainingly violent as they can possibly be as two performers.
Yeah.
And, you know, on some level on this show, at least, we have to, you know,
we appreciate that. Definitely.
I mean, yeah, it's a good knockoff because of just how stripped down it is. You know, it's exactly. It's not even trying to be like a worse version of it. It's just like, oh yeah, we also like that idea, so we're gonna make one too. Like it's very, yeah, it's nice, it's pure.
And then it leads into some like there's some comedic beats that I kind of liked. Like it's straight from Terminator, but Jean-Claude Van Damme's like. He doesn't have any self-awareness of nudity or anything like that, so he goes out in the motel parking lot completely butt naked, and even has a part where he's like kind of injured and lying very vulnerable naked in the girl's arms, which I found just it's quite an image to see Van Damme like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. The basic premise steals a lot from T2 in that he's teamed up, obviously, with this human, and they're both on the run from like someone else, like the greater villain, the villain who's more, you know, it's the good Terminator versus the bad Terminator in T2. It's literally the exact same.
Yeah. There's also stuff where he's like sitting on the waterbed and like, oh, I don't know what this is, and you know, things like that.
Yeah, well, and I got to give credit to Van Damme. I thought Van Damme very strategically underplayed a lot of that stuff. You know, it's not like Van Damme gets on the waterbed and he immediately goes, "Whoa, what the hell is this?" It's like he sits down and there's a very subtle widening of his eyes, like he expected to sit on something solid.
Yeah,
and that's
it might be like the perfect acting role for Van Damme. I feel like is like you just have to act a tiny bit and it will like that's exactly what we need. You know what I mean?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I really, I mean, is this our first time talking about Van Damme? No, we did Cyborg.
Yeah, we did
Albert
Cyborg.
Pyun.
Yeah.
Okay, but I really enjoy the setup that they do here, where Van Damme is kind of like, you know, he's the, you know, he's also in, you know, that super soldier mode where they, you know, they're putting the serum in them that's erasing their minds and everything like that. But you know, because of the traumatic experience of their last memories, for some reason I think the scientist guy comes in and explains that's why they're you know, that those memories live stronger in their minds than any of their other memories, and that's why he keeps, you know, thinking of it when the reporter like tries to like break in and take photos of the super soldiers, and Dolph Lundgren gets sent out to take care of it, and he literally just brutally executes their cameraman, like point blank. Yeah. That's such a brutal moment.
Yeah, that part's so awesome. I mean, yeah, that's I think where Universal Soldier shines the most is it's just like it's so gratuitously just like gross.
It's cruel. Yeah.
Yeah, very cruel.
Which you don't really get a lot from the other. I mean, you know, there are deaths that are you know, show a real visceral cruelty, but there's something about just these soldiers putting these news reporters on their knees and then just point blank shooting them in the head. Yeah. There's just such a coldness to that I think you don't see a lot in these action movies.
Yeah, I mean, there's not very much good guy violence. Like Van Damme spends most of the movie like running away from people. Yeah. You know, there isn't a scene where he just like shoots a bunch of bad guys. Like pretty much most of the people getting shot in this movie are like innocent people or like military guys who are, you know, controlling the Universal Soldiers or whatever. Right. I mean, maybe I'm misremembering that, but if I remember correctly, it's like it's mostly just nasty stuff.
Well, yeah, and I like too, because Cameron's right. I think that it's either a lot of like innocent people die, or it's like, you know, the kind of scientist underlings, like not the actual military.
Or you know actually what the highest body count is. I think it's actually cops. Now that I think about it, a ton of cops start to die in the second half of this movie.
Oh, yeah. That's true, because Dolph ends up turning against everyone, because there's this sort of this line that they cross where essentially, you know, they're using Dolph to hunt down Van Damme, who, you know, because of the situation with the cameraman and the screaming reporter, his instincts to, you know, that to protect innocence in his mind, you know, just kind of comes back in. So he leaves with the reporter and he takes her, you know, to the motel where they're going to hide out, and they're on the run, and she sees him as a story that they're going to expose this whole, you know, thing about, you know, reanimated soldiers and corruption. And the one military guy's like freaking out. He's like, "Do you really think the wimps at the Pentagon would let us reanimate U.S. soldiers?"
I love that line. Yeah, I wrote that line down too. Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah, it's so good. But what they didn't really anticipate is that, you know, not only is Van Damme waking up, Dolph is also waking up, and by, you know, sending him to just viciously go and kill people, they are reactivating his instinct to be a psychotic murderer at the same time, which is something they don't really anticipate. And I think that that's such an important element of it, because ultimately, you know, if there's any sort of larger idea that this film gets into, you know, by happenstance, it's that, you know, these soldiers, it's kind of a Rambo idea that it's kind of stealing it from, which is that they're bringing this stuff home.
Yeah.
You get to see this horrifying violence that was reserved for, you know, the opening scene that took place in Nam and has taken place in so many Vietnam War movies that you've seen. But it's like, now what if those guys are operating with the same sense of ruthless, visceral cruelty, but they're doing it at like a local diner filled with townies, or they're doing it at a grocery store. Which has like one of the craziest scenes in the movie.
Yeah, the grocery store scene is incredible. That's my favorite scene too. That it's the best. But something that's jumped out to me too about you know, it is like about kind of like restaging this crazy gory Vietnam conflict in the U.S. is that almost every random character, like American character that has lines is like an asshole. Like they all just suck. Like they're saying like, oh, like, you know, they're bringing this carnage home, but it's also like this place is also kind of awful just in general as well. Like every place they go to the motel, it's like the shitty motel, and they have the pervy like motel worker who's trying to upsell them. And they go, where do they go? They go to like the gas station. The guy is like listening at the door to the bathroom while they're in there. You know, there's so many characters. Like pretty much every character they interact with. The waitress at the diners is just like is really bitchy for no reason at first. Like it's just an interesting twist on that. Like, you know, like I would expect something that's leaning more into like the exploitation of like, imagine this crazy war violence like right here in your backyard. I would imagine more everyman people in it than like these like gum smacking, just like annoying people. It's an interesting choice.
Yeah, speaking on that gas station scene too, I love the shot of JCVD's just giant fucking thighs with the girl in between his legs, looking for the tracker or whatever. and at first, like the first time you see the shot, you're like, oh, that's a really funny shot. But then he keeps cutting back to it and holds on it too, to a point where I just started like it is just funny, but it becomes a different type of comedy the further it goes. Like the more prolonged that scene and that shot becomes, just watching her like look up basically directly into Van Damme's ass is hilarious. So that really was a good comedic beat, I thought.
Yeah, I like some of the stuff where they're, you know, kind of like hanging out together, and he, you know, the super soldier powers that he has, where he, you know, the truck runs out of gas and he has to push it, and then he's like, you know, doing crazy physical things like tearing through walls while trying to like run away and stuff like that, and it takes a toll. It causes them to overheat. So you know, there's bits where like she has to go and grab like 15 bags of ice to drop on him while he sits naked in the tub and stuff like that. And there's bits too where he's like obviously like obsessing over protecting her as he sees it, and he's like being like, you must buckle up, it's for your safety. And she's just like, okay, we just like ran away from like machine gun fire from super soldiers running through walls, and like you're worried about like my seatbelt and stuff like that. So there's a couple little like sort of like fish out of water super soldier kind of comedy that they try to pull that works. I love too that they fit in, as they do in every Jean-Claude Van Damme film. One of my favorite things every time it appears in one of his movies, where they try to explain where his accent comes from. And she's like, are you from France or Canada? And it always works, man. It always works. I just watched Sudden Death like a couple weeks ago for the first time, and I loved in that one where they literally just make him a Canadian hockey guy, and they were like, it's Die Hard in a hockey rink, so just make him a Canadian.
That's so good.
But yeah, and then as Jamie mentioned, you know, her looking through his legs. But my favorite part of that is that it becomes, you know, it's actually a reverse shot framed, where he's like looking at her through his thighs as well.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, like, that's a great one. Yeah, I almost forgot about that.
Yeah, like there's great little touches like that is like, it's directorial flourishes. So, credit has to be given to Roland Emmerich on some level that, he came up with some of the sort of lean visualization of this, both in terms of the action and some of the the comedy of it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the ice bath too. I don't know. I feel like that felt lifted from Jacob's Ladder too. Like it really felt like this movie is really just like a cobbling together of so many just like Vietnam movies and like like it's kind of like they were like, let's look at every like robot soldier movie and every Vietnam movie and let's kind of like just mix it all together. Yeah. But it works better than you would expect from like that premise, I guess. I feel
it definitely does. And once again, just having these two kinds of actors star in the role really works. Like we were talking about Van Damme's kind of stoic presence really works with him being the fish out of water cyborg. And then Dolph is great because even though some of his pronunciation of words can be a little awkward, he's always fully committed to it. And so when he starts to really ham it up as the evil soldier guy and start using his one-liners and stuff, it's really good. That they did cast it really well, and even though there's a lot of derivative ideas, they find ways of making them fresh every single time, or at the very least entertaining. Roland just has a really good eye for things, I think. So
and there's lots of goofy detail to it, right? Right? Like there's I love their truck base that just travels around in this chase movie. That's like a traveling carnival, but it just holds super soldiers that they then unleash on the various locations that Van Damme ends in. Like we talked about the gas station. Like they literally just explode that entire gas station. And there's a great stunt where Dolph Lundgren is in the backseat of the car and Van Damme hits a rock and Dolph literally flies from the backseat of the car through the fucking windshield. Yeah.
And that is actually, I think, the exact moment that he goes crazy too, is right after he gets Bruce Campbelled, and then he just goes nuts. Which I guess I can understand that. But yeah, that truck is so cool. The set design inside of it too, I absolutely love. That's one of my favorite just styles of set, is just a lab with screens everywhere and tanks and vapor and wires and just beeping constantly, just so over the top and just that truck is what is just so fun.
Yeah, well, and it leads to a really cool thing too, where previously in the film we've seen them. It's been shot and treated like it was kind of like a it was like a workplace. It was where all these scientists went and they worked on this elite commando team, and that's kind of how it's treated. But when Dolph wakes up and he's like, "My name is Sergeant Andrew Scott," and they start realizing that they basically activated his killing instincts and reignited him and unleashed a psycho who thinks he's still at war on everyone. Well, yeah, and he goes into that set and he shoots the tech geek's head off, and then he punches through another dude's face mask.
Oh yeah,
that's my favorite kill in the movie, when he punches through the face mask and then he snaps the neck just by grabbing him by the cheeks, and then he wipes his finger onto his uniform. Oh man.
Yeah,
beautiful.
and then we see shots of them working on other soldiers' intestines while he has now taken command of the truck and stuff like that. It honestly takes on this mad scientist horror quality once Dolph Lundgren takes command of that set. And there's a part too where he shoves the memory erase injector serum into one of the dudes' back of his head, and it comes out the front of his face.
Yeah,
it's like a slasher kill.
Yeah, it's straight up a slasher kill. And then meanwhile too, they have Van Damme and the reporter basically terrorizing a southern restaurant because Van Damme doesn't have any money and has no concept of money. So this scene, as entertaining as it is, feels definitely strange, at least in my opinion, just because these people are nothing more than restaurant owners that just want the money that they're owed for the meal that he's having, and he just kicks the ass of every single fucking person that comes up to him. It does lead to some comedy where he's like, "I don't want to hurt you, I just want to eat," that kind of thing. But
yeah, well, the funniest thing is that partially what Cameron mentioned though is that Van Damme doesn't do anything to escalate that situation.
That's true.
They come out already angry, which is just such like a strange choice where it's like everyone is weirdly aggressive towards him, despite the fact that it would be very simply answered if like the girl came back in and was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna pay for this." Like, he wasn't not gonna pay or anything.
Yeah,
but like the waitress comes out.
The waitress like is already mean to him before he orders. And then,
she's
like,
acting all sus and stuff.
Yeah, she waits until he's already eaten like 12 plates of food to be like, "Hey, can you pay for this?" And, like I would ask
maybe
after
that's
maybe
their
3.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does create some good physical comedy where like Van Damme is literally, he's doing his thing where he like kicks a dude into the air who lands on a pool table, which hits all the pool balls and goes into the pockets.
Right.
And he does that like while he's eating a sandwich, and he's like, "I just want to eat."
Right. And then you have the reporter coming up, like looking at the scene, going, "So how was lunch?" That kind of thing, just
he like breaks a dude's head on the jukebox, and he like one of my favorite touches too in this is it's a thing that you can always do with Van Damme because he's so good at the kicks, but it's a nice visual touch every time I see it, which is that they can just do a classic dirty over the shoulder shot of whoever Van Damme's looking at. And you'll just see a foot come from the bottom of the frame and hit him in the face. Like they don't cut to the wide of him doing it. His feet just like come into the frame and knock a dude over. It's like, where are they coming from? I imagine so like good. These like stretchy snakes moving around the set and whatnot. It's always a fun time. And it's just because Van Damme was that much of an athlete. Like hardly you couldn't frame another person kicking that way. Like another person has to put their whole body into it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like that scene is like pretty fun too. I also like kind of like the cuteness of Van Damme like snapping her cigarette, being because he's trying to protect her and being like, "This is dangerous for you." Right. Van Damme ultimately was like, he was like, "Just put on your seatbelt and don't smoke." That was ultimately the message of the film. But then you contrast, sort of like sweeter scenes like that with like. At this point, I think is when we hit the grocery store scene, right? Where Dolph Lundgren is just literally dragging corpses through the grocery store, which is where you get more of that. I think that more commentary in the imagery, because it's like, everyone in the grocery store, no one's an asshole there. It's like a pristine, clean place where people are just shopping around, and you just see Dolph Lundgren dragging bodies through it. You
fucked up corpses.
The other soldiers eating raw meat.
Yeah, that's my absolute favorite thing in this movie. I think is the soldier just ripping into just a raw
T-bone steak.
Yeah. Is everyone just like staring in fear? Oh, it's so cool.
It's great.
Yeah. And then, like, the security guards or cops or whatever come in, and he just, like, executes them all. And
kills, like 4
that.
cops just instantly. He said, I wrote this, he says, "And I, Sergeant Andrew Scott of the U.S. Army, I'm going to teach them all." And then he just kills 4 cops, like, instantly.
There's also a crazy shot where Dolph is dangling a dude from his leg upside down, and he just says, "I like your belt. Can I have it?" And he just steals his belt from him. So that's great, too. Not much commentary there for me, but I just found it hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
well,
the thing.
I really like to...
He's a predator, too. Like, they made him a Terminator and a predator. Like, he takes trophies from people. Because like when he shows up at the end, he has dog tags, he has that belt, he's wearing like a bunch of police badges and sheriff badges on his jacket, and then he also has like a rattlesnake rattle hanging from his hair. Right. Like it's such a weird mashup.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love too the big monologues he goes on, because he's like fully convinced he's still fighting, like a Vietnam insurgency. And he's like, "God damn it, the whole platoon is dropping like flies. You got any idea what it's like out there?" He's like screaming at like some old woman trying to like, buy a grape.
Yeah, he's got lines where like the war is over, and Dolph's like, "Not for me." That kind of shit.
Yeah, and this eventually leads to like a really fucking crazy set piece where Van Damme eventually gets captured by the police and is put in like, sort of like a prison bus. And at this point, Dolph has gone, he's like full commander leader, and he has all the tech now. So he's got like the big rig science fiction truck, and he just chases down that prison bus, and it is a great set piece in like this like on the edge of like this Arizona desert / like mountain area. And you can see the truck approaching like Steven Spielberg's Duel style, like through the bus windows and everything. Like it's so large and imposing. And then they're laying out like machine gun fire next to it, like they're in like a rival pirate boat or something like that.
Yeah.
And the driver's like head explodes with squibs, and then the truck's driving itself, just going straight for the edge of the cliff and stuff like that. While like Dolph Lundgren is like hurling grenades into the fucking truck, and the girl has to like pick them up fast enough to throw them out the window.
Yeah.
It's a really crazy set piece.
It's so cool. It feels like a video game boss. Like it's like it's so cool. Yeah. In my notes, I literally just wrote car fight because I couldn't think of like the words to write how cool I thought this was.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just it. It reminded me of like Duel or Breakdown, like the films we've talked about on this show, where it's literally like car versus car thrillers. I haven't seen it quite on like that scale, because like, Steven Spielberg's Duel doesn't have the guy hurling grenades at them and Dolph like doing one-liners out the side of the big rig, and it doesn't quite have the drama of them also doing these really great like wide vista shots, again just really great location work where you can like literally see like the edges of the cliffs and everything like that, and it's really impressively done, where it creates some tension on like one of these vehicles is going over the edge and it's happening. Turns out both of them, actually, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and that shot of Van Damme like getting out of the bus as it's being dragged towards the cliff and jumping off is a legitimately awesome stunt. Like it shows like from a complete wide shot the whole like the truck pushing.
Yeah, you're talking about when it's completely flipped over and the big rig is like pushing it off the edge.
Yeah.
And then he climbs out like through one of like the
open windows,
the side
I believe,
windows of the bus, and he's on top of it while the truck is pushing him off.
Yeah, it's great. It's really
it
good.
looks really fucking dangerous. So I'll give them credit.
It looked legitimate, which I was concerned about. It looked like a real cliff and a real stunt that Van Damme did. So yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, and Dolph in the big ring ends up like going off the edge, and there's a giant explosion. I wasn't sure if it was like miniatures or not, because it looks really good. It was convincing if it wasn't miniatures, but yeah, like it's a really really cool set piece. And what's interesting is that that would be anyone else's like the big set piece of the film. And I was sitting there going, man, there's still like 25 minutes left in this movie.
Yeah.
The first time I watched it, I was like, what's going on here? And of course they have to do that slasher movie idea of he didn't actually get taken down and you got to fight him once again. And it also just hammers home also again sort of like the domestic spaces being intruded on by this violence, because they've done the gas station, which they've exploded and surrounded with charred cyborg bodies, which was a detail we slightly missed. They've done the diner, the grocery store, the motel, and now we've ended up at just the nice family farmhouse in Louisiana, where they've taken Luke Devereaux, Jean-Claude Van Damme's character, back to his family home, and we get what we've been waiting for the whole time: Van Damme versus Dolph, full-on final fight confrontation style. Two super soldiers kind of like going at each other, and they incorporate like Dolph injecting himself with the serum to make himself stronger.
Oh yeah.
Eventually Van Damme has to inject himself with it to like meet him on his level.
And before Van Damme is just getting like tossed around by Dolph, which was really interesting to see.
Yeah.
Like
Thrown
he's just
through barn doors.
Yeah, there's one part where Dolph is holding him like from his shirt, like the back of his shirt, like a log if you're trying to take down a door, and he just starts pummeling the guy through the window of the door of the car door, and it's wild. Like it's really really violent, and just to see Van Damme take that kind of a beating was interesting.
Yeah, I love this final confrontation. This is like, I think, exactly in any movie where it's two big action guys and they're going to fight by the end. This is exactly the style of fight I want to see at the end, where it's like it's like pouring rain, but there's also somehow like fire too, like around them. Yes. And it's just like muddy, and like it's just like they're just throwing each other around. It's such a good final fight, like just so perfect and climactic.
I like how it progresses too, because it starts off with kind of like the pushing of each other and whatever, and then it turns into the gunfight, and then eventually they're just straight up brawling. So yeah, it kind of takes all aspects of what these actors are known for, and then putting it all together into this finale was really cool.
It also has and such an incredible one-liner for like the turning point where like Van Damme starts to finally start like beating Dolph is when Dolph says, say goodnight, asshole. And then he just looks back at him and says, good night, asshole. Starts going at it. It's so cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff in there. As you mentioned, it's just nothing but like, again, this is that period when like every American action movie was stealing shit from John Woo. So like half of what you watch is just like destruction of the environment plus slow-mo of, you know, fire and things everywhere and just blood and mud and, you know, all the elements there. And so, you know, you get a moment like Van Damme in slow motion just rising his head, and it's like the most, you know, it's so emphasized. It's like the biggest thing in the world because, you know, Dolph at that point I think is like threatening both the family and he's threatening the reporter and everything like that, and he's like, well, you can't do that. And Dolph at this point too, he gets to go like pretty maniacal with the lines. He gets to go like, we should shoot her in the head. And then he goes, hey, it's empty, man.
I also love when JCVD starts to do his signature kicks, and he starts like, Dolph is getting excited that he's fighting back, and he's like, that's the spirit soldier.
It's good. And he gets some good lines where he's just like, you're asking for a court martial or shit like that.
He also does. He says, wow, she really has beautiful ears when he kidnaps the reporter.
Such a weird line.
Dolph is just, you can tell that Dolph's having a fucking blast too, which was a lot of fun to see. Like, because he doesn't get to ham it up too much in a lot of the movies I've seen, but this one he just gets to go full throttle with it, and he's like got a smile while he's doing all of these lines. So it was fun to see.
Yeah, and I really like too that, you know, this is, you know, it's Dolph and Van Damme. You know, they, as you'll see too, if anyone goes and checks out the direct-to-video sequels, like they, Dolph at this point was in a lot better shape than he is when he's a little bit older. He can't do quite the kicks that he can do that he does in this, but Dolph and Van Damme did a lot more kicks than a lot of the other big action stars do. So watching these two like roundhouse kick each other and like kick each other and stuff is just a lot of fun. And I love how they incorporated that into like the big climactic moment where like Van Damme gets to do a jump kick to Dolph, who then gets pierced by the harvester that they visually set up so early in that set piece. They keep cutting back to it, and you're like, I wonder if that harvester's going to get used. And Dolph just gets a giant harvester pierced through his chest, and then you think that it's over, but it's not. He keeps coming for him, and eventually he breaks his arm so that he feels a bunch of pain from that, and then just turns it on and just mulches him while saying,
my God.
You're discharged, Sarge.
It's literally a Mortal Kombat stage fatality. Like,
it's
the chunks of him fly into the air. He just gets completely threshed. It's incredible. And then he goes back to the reporter or whatever, and she's like, where is he? And he says, around.
Yeah, dude, you literally get the shot of the chunks coming out the end of it like it's Fargo.
yeah, you do. And I like that they do that kind of cliche, but always love it, thing where Van Damme is, you know, realized his humanity, and so he's just like, no, I am alive. And then that's when he starts kicking Dolph into the spikes and all that. Good stuff.
Well, yeah, because it's a reference earlier to when they say that he doesn't realize that he's alive, and he said, no, he doesn't realize that he's dead.
Right.
We're both dead.
Yeah.
So now, but now he's got something to live for. And I think they even end on a joke too, where she's like, how do you feel? And he's like, I feel like a 50-year-old because he's so exhausted. He actually feels his age finally. And then the greatest touch of all time. Do you guys know it? It's coming. Body count. Body count. Body count.
Dude, that unbelievable. But that that's the drop after this like sentimental hug scene with him.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I love it. It's so 90s, and I'm all the way for it. But it's just so funny that they really dive into that kind of like, I found my humanity. I have a reason to live. I have a love in my life, possibly, and cue body count.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, we should be clear. He got to that conclusion by mulching Dolph Lundgren into pieces.
Yeah, that is very true. So I see,
and I would say that there is a very severe body count to the film. I'm not sure if that's why they selected the
yeah,
music
that's gotta be it. That's gotta be it.
But yeah, the hardcore hip hop / rock group Body Count, headed by Ice-T.
Yep.
Doing
who
his
we will
song,
be talking
Body
about.
Count,
Yep.
Body Count in the House. Yeah, it's a connection between the two films.
Yep, there it is.
Doing Body Count in the House. And Jamie, I don't know if you can, if we're able to even play the song at all, but if anyone who hasn't heard it, they have to hear just a couple lines of
it is such
Body
a sick
Count,
song.
Body Count. But yeah, that is Universal Soldier pivoting towards the reductive rating round here. This one gets a solid 4 from me. As I mentioned, this movie very blatantly steals from obviously some of the best actioners of the 80s, like we talked about RoboCop and Terminator. I even mentioned a little bit of Rambo in there too, with bringing sort of like Vietnam War home and the dehumanizing effect of, militarization, and done in this, very lean sort of like genre machine kind of style of filmmaking. I think that it's done very, solidly by Emmerich. I would have liked to have seen him make more movies like this.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that it lends itself well to both Van Damme and Lundgren, who, at the time, especially, English maybe still wasn't, what they were most comfortable with.
It is. We didn't even mention. It's so funny that they're like cast as these two, like they're like objects of like American
all American
imperialism,
boys.
but
yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, and the third guy is a German guy, and Emmerich is also German. So it's so funny. Like this was a European's vision of what sort of American militarization coming back to America might look like. And you know what? It's good. It's their stiff acting style lends itself to this idea of reanimated Vietnam meat sacks coming back to unleash violence at a local diner or gas station or grocery store near you. And I like too that Van Damme plays it as the muscled innocent puppy dog, and Lundgren is the muscled genocidal psycho, and together they form this yin yang of America's violent amnesia and just really gross violence that they unleash. I didn't clock it until Cameron mentioned it, but it is true that all of the violence here is done on it's not heroic violence. It's all very horrifying violence. And despite that, this film is directed, again, with absolutely zero pretension by Roland Emmerich. Despite, the fact that we've described a mid-budget B movie with a high-concept sci-fi premise that could be done by someone else, like a Paul Verhoeven, as a satire. Instead, all we get here is all the kicks and grenades and squibs and one-liners and just pure 90s slow-mo fire and rain ownage that is absolutely as R-rated as one could hope from a movie like this. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen Emmerich make more films like this instead of what he ended up doing.
I think Emmerich he's always gone for those like big scale kind of films, especially later on. I think this is a good mixture of both like a more, mostly just like the location work, grounded action 90s action film.
It's like the concept is a lean thriller, but he directs it as like a big meat-headed dumb guy actioner with huge scale when the action actually hits.
Exactly. So yeah, I would give this a 4 out of 5 as well. I think this is a perfect vehicle for Dolph and Van Damme. I really do like Roland's visual flair. I think the colors in the motel sequence are really, really cool. It's like greens and purples, which I liked a lot. He's just he's a good filmmaker. I just think that, like you said, Josh, he's diving, especially in the last like 20 years, he's basically just diving into the PG disaster kind of films a lot of the time, or maybe like a big scale war kind of film. And I just think he would really benefit from going back to the more like visceral and violent, bloody stuff that he did here.
Did any of you guys watch his 10,000 BC, which was like his
didn't.
attempt at
I
like
heard it was not good.
He tried to like PG Apocalypto. Such a weird thing to try to do.
Don't do that. Yeah, I don't get it. I really hope that something clicks in his brain while his career is still going, that he goes, I need to create something really visceral and violent again, because I think he's very good at it.
This is super weird that I know this too, but I actually think that his best film other than this and Stargate is his Shakespeare movie. Did you guys know that he made a Shakespeare movie?
No. I have it on my list, but I only recently found out about it because I saw that you rated it pretty highly. So
yeah, it's a movie that he did about. It's called Anonymous, and it's literally a movie about the conspiracy theory that Shakespeare didn't write any of his plays.
That's awesome.
And Roland Emmerich essentially just takes that at face value and makes a movie dramatizing the sort of like conspiracy thriller on what if Shakespeare was a hack fraud who stole all his work from like other people. And it's surprisingly classical and serious. And I was like, it's like the only non-action movie that I've seen him do, and it was surprisingly better than a lot of his, his actual disaster stuff that he's done.
Yeah, because I do like.
But before we go too far,
I was just gonna say I do like Independence Day, but they're like 2012, Day After Tomorrow. I find those quite boring and overly long, very bloated, and they could all use like more gore. I mean, if you had 2012, but people were just getting like decapitated by flying signs or something, I'd be like, yeah, 2012 sick. But
a little bit more on board.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
before we digress too far, Cameron, for you.
Yeah, do you guys do half stars or no? You don't?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm giving this a 3.5.
Nice.
Because I think this is just, to me, the definition of just, a solid action movie. It's nothing that does anything like super special with the form. It's very clearly a pastiche of a lot of stuff, but I think that's what makes it so fun, is that it has a lot of stuff going on from like T2 and RoboCop and such, but it's not choosing one of those to really focus on. It kind of just pulls elements from a lot of stuff. I think it's just a nice like well done I guess object of the genre. It's like, it's not like you watch it and it's like a worse version of any of those. It's just its own little funny little thing. But I do think that for me, I think a lot of the comedy that's thrown in there, there's a lot that's like fun, that's kind of done visually, but most of the comedy that's like in the dialogue is just really tough for me. I don't, it like kind of takes me out of it.
Yeah, it's that blockbuster family.
Yeah, exactly. It's the kind of thing. I mean, and it's also just a personal bias, but it totally. I hear the like type of jokes that that are being written in here, and it just gives me flashbacks of Godzilla 1998, and I'm like, yeah, I see where this guy's headed. I don't know, yeah, but I mean, yeah, just disgusting gore, which is really nice. I think it could be a little shorter too, but other than that, just solid.
Definitely. And if anyone hasn't seen the direct-to-video sequels from 2009 and 2012, Universal Soldier Regeneration and Universal Soldier Day of Reckoning, must watch it.
Yeah, I've heard those are incredible.
Day of Reckoning is absolutely the best one, and Regeneration is basically just as good as this one. They're all 4s for me, but Reckoning was honestly, it almost hit that 5 for me, because like that first direct-to-video sequel, it takes the reanimated corpse super soldier concept, and instead of doing like kind of like the broad 90s actioner with it tries to turn it into kind of like this like Eastern Front like synth horror film almost, where it's like, the Van Damme is now kind of like the aged clone of the former Luke Devereaux, and he basically has to kind of just get back into instinctively what he knows how to do when he's like woken up to being repurposed by someone else, and he just like shreds people on screen. And Hyams, John Hyams, who's the son of Peter Hyams, one of the best people working in like direct-to-video action right now, like really clean widescreen framing and camera movement, and like the actual martial arts choreography and stuff is like fantastic. And if you want to see like Dolph and Van Damme in their old age, like doing stuff that's like just as impressive as when they were younger, like it's very, very grisly action. And then for Day of Reckoning, they just take that whole like slasher kind of thing they tried in Regeneration, and they take it to like a full-on like surreal horror abstraction. It's
sick.
like things I thought about watching Day of Reckoning was like things like Zoller or like Lynch. There's a death in it that reminded me of like Twin Peaks: The Return almost. It has like full-on massacres and like punches through people's heads where like the gore goes everywhere, and like they also throw in Scott Adkins, who is like the modern, athlete king of, direct-to-video action stuff. Some of his fighting that they do is incredible. And he gets a one-on-one fight with Dolph and a one-on fight with Van Damme, which I won't spoil. Awesome. But I will say that they are both. Van Damme's is more physically impressive, but Dolph's is incredibly violent and has like machetes and stuff in it. It's cool. It's really, really crazy stuff, and lots of slow-mo neon despair and hyper violence, and again, some of the cleanest martial arts stuff, the kind of stuff that you wish that you still saw in action movies today, but like you kind of have to go back to old Jackie Chan stuff to see people do those kinds of fighting and choreography and stuff. You can still find that stuff happening in the direct-to-video scene, and I am pleased to say that Universal Soldier sequels are those kinds of movies. Like, they're more martial arts heavy than this movie is.
Oh, okay, that's
a lot.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've got the second one on my download list right now. I'm probably gonna watch it tonight, honestly.
Hell yeah! So definitely recommend checking those out before we go. And then the last thing I wanted to mention before we move on, because somehow I missed saying this in my notes. Did you guys read that thing about how Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren apparently attended the Cannes Film Festival together for this film, and like they to promote the film, they like literally staged a fight as if they were really mad at each other?
That's awesome.
No, that's awesome. That's so.
Does anyone have that videotape somewhere? Because I would love.
I don't know.
I'm
gonna have to see if they can find it. But they literally staged a brawl on like the red carpet at Cannes, pretending that there was real beef behind the scenes, even though they both revealed later that they're like best buds.
That's so sick.
So funny. That's
I love
great.
it. That's so good.
But I think that wraps it up here for Universal Soldier. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about Johnny Mnemonic.
And a pair of forceps. For the future's most wanted fugitive. Keanu Reeves.
You can't shoot me.
Not in the head.
Johnny Mnemonic.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Johnny Mnemonic, the 1995 Canadian-American cyberpunk action thriller film directed by Robert Longo in his directorial debut. What a debut movie!
Oh, man. What a brave debut. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, also his only movie?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, I believe so. I think
Now,
that's my favorite. When a man has a vision, makes it, goes out, just leaves.
Yeah,
we'll get into
shorts,
some interesting conversations about him. Because I don't know if you guys know that, but he's a visual artist. He's a painter.
Gotcha.
First and foremost, and I thought it was very interesting because I was trying to figure out if he didn't make another film because this kind of went poorly and people didn't want him to do another film, or if he just had it with the experience because he preferred kind of the isolation of doing visual art instead. I read a conversation kind of like a couple years later, I think, that was between the writer William Gibson and Robert Longo, they were like, both of them were basically like not filmmakers, like either of them. They were both like, he sits in his room and he writes his stuff, and I sit in my room and I paint my stuff, and we both came together and made a film, but neither of us really knew how to make a film. And he said that they were both so stressed at making such a collaborative piece of work that they were very excited to be done filming this and to go back to just turtling in their own, like apartments and stuff like that. So that's kind of like the personalities that they had here. But famously, he did the Men in Cities paintings, which even if you might not know them by name, you'd probably recognize them if you saw them. They're a very famous drawing and print series, which depict like these kind of like sharply dressed men and women, but like their bodies are all like freakishly contorted in various ways. And very famously, they're actually what's hanging on the walls of Patrick Bateman's apartment in American Psycho.
Oh wow.
He has this very kind of like it's kind of described by others as very kind of like stark, sort of like neo-expressionist painting style. And he translated that into eventually production design work and eventually music videos, and that was enough for him to eventually get considered when they were looking for someone to make a film, which was an adaptation of a short story, obviously by William Gibson, who is like one of the most famous sci-fi authors of all time. He is typically referred to as the father of cyberpunk. Because he did a lot of sort of like noir stories that involve cyberspace and cybernetics and computer technology. A lot of his descriptions pre-internet like vaguely sound like what the internet actually did become. He was kind of a bit of a trailblazer in that genre, and also he was very against the idea, as you can tell by this movie, of this idea of science fiction as like laser blasters and like pristine buildings, like kind of like what Star Wars sometimes looked like. He was all about the idea of what if it more closely resembled like the punk grotesqueries on the ground. He describes it as he wanted to bring rock and roll to sci-fi, was what I read that he said that he wanted to do with a lot of his writing.
That's where you get like especially Ice-T's gang that we'll get into, where they all have that kind of like
the
punkish
low-tex
aesthetic, and yeah. They're living in like a dilapidated bridge.
And I think overall both of those two guys, coming together to make something, it does translate. We'll get into obviously some of the crazy specifics of it, and we'll lay out the story and everything. But overall, I really liked this kind of like the sort of vaguely Terminator tech noir thing meets like a fantasy dystopia with like cyborg body mods and like the capitalism literally poisoning the people, and then they throw in some Takeshi Kitano, who obviously one of the best Japanese actors and filmmakers at the time. I'm actually kind of embarrassed that we're talking about this is the first time we're going to be talking about Takeshi Kitano, because like eventually we're going to do like Violent Cop and Sonatine and like Hanabi and like some of his all-timer Yakuza and gangster films that he did that have like a really amazing, emotional through line to a lot of them. But then, you also throw in Dolph Lundgren, you have Keanu Reeves, and then you have, a heroin addicted codebreaker dolphin. Put all those things together, and you kind of got you got some cinema on your hands.
Oh, that's
I think.
yeah.
A lot of people seem to disagree. This doesn't seem to be a particularly loved film by any means, especially just looking at some of my mutuals.
How can you not appreciate a heroin addicted dolphin?
I don't get it. People are. You got to be a real like stick in the mud to not find some fun in this. I think like to not see some like genuine like interesting and like some talent involved too. I mean,
absolutely.
I think probably on it, what rubs people the wrong way, I want to say, is that this is definitely much more of a writer heavy film than it is a director heavy one, with like the exception of some really cool sequences. Like I know a lot of people hate the CGI internet stuff. I think that's so cool. I think that's some of the best parts of the movie. Some like really interesting flair thrown in. But this is definitely more like, this feels like William Gibson was like, oh shit, I'm writing a movie. Oh fuck, like, and just kind of like went balls to the wall in a way that you don't really see. I think in a lot of movies, it's definitely written more like a novel than it is like a movie.
And it's clearly written like outside what they could achieve on a budgetary level. And it was funny, they both talked about when they wanted to make it together, they originally pitched it as like a $1.5 million movie or something, and no one was taking them seriously. And then eventually they came back and pitched it as a $15 million film and a $20 million film. Eventually it ended up being a $30 million film, like a huge film for two first-time filmmakers. And they ended up getting obviously some big actors involved in it and everything like that. But I think you're right in the sense that like Gibson describes writing, novels as like you don't need to care about anything else. Like you can literally write whatever the fuck you want. You're not thinking about a budget while you're writing. You're just imagining these amazing things on the page. And so what I think we see in this film is Gibson's very clear talent and imagination rub up against what was literally tangibly possible in the year 1995 to capture his vision, right? Like I think that's ultimately the issue here for the film, but I'm surprised that, you know, there are so many people who, you know, they don't get any kind of goofy charm out of that ambition. They see it and they go, oh, it failed. They don't go, look what they tried to do. Isn't it so crazy?
Yeah.
Which is kind of like my, you know, the feelings that I came out of the film with watching it for the first time.
And honestly, most of the time I found it to be pretty well made. I mean, like, you know, you can make fun of the CGI parts where he goes into the computer, but I do think that there's a specific charm, and also just like the visualization from the 90s of what the virtual reality internet would be is very interesting. But for the most part, I thought the effects were pretty good. Like they have they have that really awesome tool that the bad guys use. That's like the red laser wire cutter, basically. And they have moments where they take that laser wire and just decapitate people as if they're like slitting their throats like an assassin or something. And it's well done. I think it's cut together in a way that, you know, the decapitations are believable. There's some good gunfighting in it. I do like Keanu in this as well. I think that he's well suited to this role. So, yeah, there's a lot to really go on about.
I mean, and as the CGI internet stuff too, I think like, you know, I can kind of understand where some people are coming from. Whether like, you know, I think there are some weird cardboard actors in this movie, and you know, there's every once in a while there's a shot that's just very wonky and kind of takes you out of it a little bit. But like, you know, stuff like the CGI internet, I see people complain like, oh, like, remember back in the 90s when we thought that's what the internet would look like? And it's like, what, do you want these guys to sit down and type at a computer for like 2 minutes instead? Like,
exactly.
Like, this looks so cool. Like, it's so imaginative and fun and just like, and like, yeah, also like, I mean, I have to say the world building, like, you know, I think that you're right that like it's a lot about what they kind of tried to do, but I think on a lot of that, just like their sheer attempts to like, you know, flesh out this world in a way that's maybe wasn't financially or like even maybe physically possible in the way they wanted to, just works just because they just had the sheer willpower to try to do it. Like you're just instantly dropped into this place and you have like there's 20 factions already and like every set just looks insane in a different way, like, and it just feels like, oh, this is like some crazy stitched together like East meets West like city, just because you see so many different people and so many weird stuff going, you know, it's very
it's funny, this was a huge concern in the 90s. We've discovered doing Dolph Month was that Japan was economically going to supersede America, because it happens in The Punisher, where the Punisher takes on the Yakuza. In Showdown in Little Tokyo, he takes on the Yakuza.
Yep.
And now here, he's not taking down the Yakuza, but the Yakuza are there, and they are a physical, you know, presence that are going to harm the hero in a way. But yeah, overall, I think that they did a pretty decent job with this kind of, you know, sort of Blade Runner-esque idea of like a futuristic aesthetic that's been infected by all of the, you know, horrible modern systems and textures of kind of like the present world. So it's a lot of like, you know, there's these corporate future spaces and neon lit clubs with, you know, but in the basement, it's all like rusted and dilapidated, and it's where they slice open people's heads and bodies for the digital data that's stored inside their skulls. And, you know, when it's very much a story of Keanu's character, who is a guy who makes money by hollowing out his brain of childhood memory so that he can fit corporate data inside of it and literally move data in like a, you know, in flesh storage. And it's literally him working in that world where he has money from doing that. And he loves the hotels, and he loves the what does he eventually say? The $10,000 hookers.
The shirts. He wants his shirts to be ironed or something.
He wants room service.
Yeah,
exactly.
He wants his shirts laundered like they do at the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo. That's what he says.
Yes, so it's very much him in that lifestyle being thrust down into, you know, like the really filthy alleys and junkyards of like the suffering that takes place to make that world possible.
Yeah. Do they explain?
Kind of like the large.
Do they explain why they needed like a physical being to transfer the data rather than just using like what we would do now, like a cloud of some kind? Was there an explanation?
Well, from what I understood is they did it because it was like more top secret and safe. Like Keanu's brain is not hooked into the internet. Is the way that they saw it.
Right, just more secure. I see. Gotcha.
Yeah, so this was seen as like the ultimate secure way. Although you're not wrong though, Jamie, is that like other reviews that I read from the time, that was a big hang up people had, is that they were like, you know, we're far enough along in the existence of the internet that like we think that, you know, you just give them a drive. Just do some fiber optic transfer or something. So that was some people's complaints at the time, but I mean, in my opinion, it's just an excuse to make this physically exciting.
Exactly.
Which is what movies do.
Exactly.
I think one big thing about cyberpunk as a genre, especially like nowadays, is it has kind of this like fundamental juxtaposition where it's like about this like super grim, awful world where corporations have taken over and everyone's being ground down into dust by like, you know, capital and whatever. But it's also like, oh, it's like shiny lights and samurai with laser swords and stuff, you know. And I think that this, you know, does a really good job in kind of walking that middle line where, you know, something like Blade Runner is, you know, it's sad and it's, you know, it's grim, but this also doesn't, it's not fully crossing the line into like, you know, it's hammy and it's ridiculous, but there's still this like this very like, like he has information in his brain which is like, you know, it's so stupid and campy, but also like they are going to cut his head off and they're going to like pull out his organs and stuff, like, you know. It's perfect,
replaced his memories as a person.
Exactly. It does a great job, I think, of like, you know, not leaning too hard into the grim dark you know, aspects which you know can be really overdone and feel very edgy at times, but it's also, you know, it's just goofy and fun at the same time.
Well that's just it, is you can tell that on some level, you know, they knew that when they actually went to make the film that they were like, holy shit, we're kind of making a pulp movie, because it's kind of like this quasi action chase piece essentially, where like, you know, Keanu, there are 3 different groups of people who just want to chop Keanu's head off for the corporate data that he stored in his head, like a you know, like a hard drive essentially. And I love that bit where he's just like, you know, I got 80 gigs of space in my brain, I'm gonna double up, I'm gonna get that to a solid 160 gigs. I'm like, sick. That's like how much space, you know, like movie files take up on my computer. And then, though, they tell him that it's like 320 gigabytes, so he takes over capacity. So then the premise becomes, I mean, he overfilled his head with data, and so his head is literally going to explode in 24 hours if it doesn't get, like, extracted.
Yeah.
So,
and it's interesting.
What's funny is that...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, just talk about the brief thing of some of the Japanese and American versions, like the differences or whatever. And just the way that they do it in the American version, it seems when he starts to have these moments, he starts to just kind of see like flashes of katana and stuff, and that's the way that they incorporate it. Whereas the Japanese one seems more based on his actual childhood, like personally. So it's interesting that they make switches there in both versions, because for some reason, I don't know why they did it, but in the American version, they really they barely show Katana a lot of the time.
I guess we forgot. Interesting. I guess we forgot to mention this. We talked about it briefly before we started the show, but there are 2 cuts to this film for anyone unfamiliar. There's the American cut, and there's a Japanese cut that has about 6 or 7 more minutes. And most of what's included in the Japanese cut is a little bit more Kitano, a little bit more Dolph Lundgren's character, and just general violence. Like there's a lot of stuff where, like, you know, they just cut away 3 seconds earlier in the theatrical, so you don't see like the last detail of, like, you know, a body falling, or you know, a little piece of gore gets missed out, or, you know, something like that. But also, from what I read, and maybe we'll figure this out here now because Cameron, I think, said he watched the theatrical. I watched Japanese, and Jamie watched both.
Yeah.
The score apparently is completely different. So that's a big deal. Like when I was watching the Japanese, it was all like this kind of like synthy and like industrial rock kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What's the score in the theatrical?
I'm trying to
There's
remember.
like they got some like metal, like new metal type stuff going on at some parts.
Okay.
I don't remember, honestly, now that I think about it, I noticed like soundtrack songs. I don't remember if they're like, original score songs very much at all. But I know that they had like some Fear Factory. I think Fear Factory might have been the credits actually, but like that type of thing.
Gotcha.
There's one scene when they're in the club, they have like the like heavy metal guitars and like an operatic singer going. I don't know if they had that in the Japanese cut. They had kind of like a Nightwish style thing going on.
Interesting.
Okay.
No, in the Japanese, there were some moments in the more dramatic score moments that kind of sounded a little bit sort of like Twin Peaksy almost.
Okay.
And then when the action kicked up, it was a lot of score based around, like it sounded more like metal.
Okay.
And those were the two different kind of things.
I think there was
that it
some club
switched
to
between.
death sounding stuff too. Now that I think more about it, I think I remember one fight scene having like a more clubby type thing too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like
Okay.
it's strange, like the American version with Kitano, it kind of makes it so his character barely makes any sense in comparison to the Japanese, because he gets really fleshed out in the Japanese cut. He has a ton of moments where he's like, he gets a backstory of his daughter that's passed, and so he's kind of working with the overall AI. Like that's his motivation for what he's doing. Whereas in the American version, he doesn't even show up, I think, until like 45 minutes into it, and even then it's mostly just showing him as like the leader and just the guy that's kind of controlling things. He doesn't really have much of an arc, which is very interesting.
They have a few clips of him throughout. He's in there pretty early, but only like I think only for like probably like a minute maybe.
Yeah.
Like they just show him as like the commander of the Yakuza guys, and then it is very, in the American cut, it is like very strange when he kind of has a change of heart at the end, because they mention that he has a daughter who died, but they don't really establish anything about it or that he cares about it at all. Like they kind of just like say it.
That's so interesting, because in the Japanese cut, there's scenes of like Kitano alone in his office, looking so lonely and sad, looking at holograms of his dead daughter who died from the poisoning that is causing this, and he doesn't realize that he's eventually we'll get to it, but that he's like essentially sitting on the cure. So his role in the Japanese is that he's not friends with the Yakuza. He just hires them to get the data back because the AI is telling him to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow,
there's also stuff more like with the lead Yakuza guard that's always hunting Johnny. There's more scenes where he's talking to the leader and being instructed to do certain things. There's even one part where Kitano comes out and just fucking stabs two of his bodyguards to like teach him a lesson or something in the Japanese cut that's not in the American cut. And the American cut takes out a lot, to the point where I definitely prefer the Japanese cut, and I think I'd even give it, when we'll get to it, like I would give them both different ratings too.
I'll have to check that
Interesting.
out.
Yeah, I think the American cut does take a bit of a toll with some of the stuff they got rid of, and not that it really ruins anything. Things still make sense. It's just with the more fleshed out plotting of Kitano, especially, his stuff makes a lot more sense. And you get a little bit more fun stuff, like that scene where Dolph is introduced as this crazy religious Jesus freak. He's having like a complete ceremony in a church, and that's actually not in the American version, which I was disappointed to see. Yeah, and it's so much fun. I think what they did a lot was just take anything they felt they could get rid of to make it an hour and a half. And that Dolph ceremony scene, I mean, it sets the tone, and I think it's necessary, but I could see an editor going like, we could cut that, so there's a lot of that stuff.
That's so good of Dolph and his like big Jesus hair.
Oh yeah.
And he when he's doing that sermon, and he's like, the Lord came to me and I was healed and made post-human. He's talking about the cybernetic
I missed out on
upgrades
that.
and stuff.
Yeah, I gotta check this out.
We'll send it
to
delivering he's delivering sermons about like stricken by the sickness that devours the silver pathways of the soul.
Yeah, the close-up shots of his dagger that's literally a crucifix of Jesus.
Oh, they do have that. Yeah, they have.
Yeah,
his introduction. They have him like when he's talking to, I forget who he's talking to. He's talking to, I think
he's talking to Katana, right?
I think he might be. But he has like a little like viddy screen thing in his Bible.
Right.
In his Bible, that's so sick.
Yeah, it's like so cool. Yeah, and then he has the crucifix that just has a giant like combat knife at the end. That's his introduction.
Does the theatrical have the scene where he goes up to the one dude and freezes his hand?
It does have that.
It does
smashes
have that,
it to pieces. Okay, that's
I will
good.
say
That's
I
good.
was shocked at the differences in the cut. Is mostly character stuff, and there is some missing gore in the American version, but for the most part, they stayed with the violence. Like there is still the shot of him like lifting his broken, smashed hand up, and it's bloody and red, and
the bone sticking out and everything.
Yeah,
and
that's
he goes,
still
"Oh
there."
man, why'd you go and do that?"
yeah, like all that stuff is there. The decapitations with the red wire is still there. It's mostly Katano and Dolph.
Okay, because that dude getting sliced into pieces and the pieces like sliding off and stuff like that. That part's sick. With the laser, you know what I'm talking about?
Maybe that. Yeah, I think I do, but I'm trying to remember if that one's in the other version.
That one might not be
if that doesn't sound familiar, because that's definitely the goriest thing that happens in the Japanese cut. It's that guy who has the laser like strangling wire. He hits. I can't remember which guy he actually hits, but he does hit. He kills a guy with it, and you actually see him cut into 3 different pieces, and you see the chunks of flesh like slide off. His body and everything.
Okay, I don't remember that in the American. I could be wrong, but that might be an added one. They also do a lot of more like where there's a wound on somebody, they'll do a 2-second shot of it rather than cut away. Like they'll actually linger on the body a little bit more.
just subtle stuff like that.
Yeah, that's mostly what the differences are.
Oh, but what's interesting is how much of like the overall stuff, despite that. So there is a slightly better cut of the movie that's out there. But I have to imagine that even the theatrical cut of this film, there's lots of stuff that that the broad stuff still works.
Oh yeah.
Other than it sounds like they harmed the Katano character, a lot of this I imagine is still functionally the same.
It really does seem like they wanted to get rid of the Japanese dialogue, because a lot of the scenes they cut had Japanese dialogue in it, and there's none, I don't think, in the American version.
There's one scene when they introduce Katana. I think they literally cut every scene with Japanese dialogue that isn't because the first one, the only scene with Japanese dialogue is the one where they introduce Katana and he's talking to, I think Shinji is the name of the
right.
Oh, and then he asks
assassin.
the guy to speak English.
Yeah. Well, they don't.
Right.
They also I watched it on Pluto TV because I didn't feel like getting a free trial of something, and they did not have subtitles for the Japanese dialogue, which I don't know was if that was part of the platform or if they didn't have subtitles in the actual cut or what. But I do remember there was that one scene with the Japanese in it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because now that I remember, because you just said it, Josh, where he tells him to start speaking English. That's the one scene.
Yeah,
they
so
kept.
the guy starts speaking English. Yeah,
that's why they kept it. Yeah,
that's very funny.
That is funny.
Yeah, but I will say, like, I think we haven't really gotten into some of the
plotting.
Some of the plotting, which maybe we should for anyone who sounds really confused about what the fuck we're talking
yeah,
about.
for sure.
But, we mentioned something. We mentioned that, Keanu is, considered a sort of mnemonic courier who is a human data carrier, and it's the internet 2021.
We have arrived.
We're here, baby. We've made it.
That's right.
And, essentially the overall idea of what the world currently looks like is that it's, as they say in the opening crawl, it's like the new century age of terminal capitalism, they call it. The armored towers of multinational corporations rise above the ruins of democracies that gave birth to them. You can tell that this was written by a cyberpunk novelist.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah. Soldiers of the Yakuza defend them. Hackers, data pirates, low-tech media rebels are the enemy, burrowing like rats in the walls of cyberspace. And the last touch here is that there is a new plague that convulses the city. Nerve attenuation syndrome. It's incurable, fatal, epidemic, bringing fear and misery as old as the species itself. And that's a touch, I think, too, that's very writerly, but I like it. This idea that, we're in like this futuristic setting, but the thing that's harming everyone is a plague.
Yeah.
Essentially, like that's
all the technology couldn't help us. Yeah.
And man, I love the freak out session that Henry Rollins, the lead singer of Black Flag, shows up in the movie as a cast member, which is just super sick, just in general.
Yeah.
But he gets like one of the best moments where he's like screaming about like information overload, where he's like that's what's causing this NAS, the black shakes, I think they call it at one point, this sort of disease is being caused by the actual technology surrounding people and poisoning them. Yeah. And he's like, all the electronics around you are poisoning the airwaves. It's technological fucking civilization, but we still have all this shit because we can't live without it. And just Henry Rollins delivering that, it's sick. It's pretty sick.
Yeah, and his character's name is Spider, too. Like, come on, yeah. So awesome.
And I like that, like, the cyber tech can become somewhat of an addiction for people. I think that's one of Dolph's main, not motivators really, but just the reason he is so crazy was because he became addicted to getting these like biotech enhancements done to him, and now that's why he's like trying to scam people through his religion and beating people up and stealing from people and all that kind of stuff. That's why he's a total psychopath. And I think also Johnny's eventual partner, the girl, she also has somewhat of an addiction. At one point, her, I don't know, ex-manager of some kind or something, twists over her arm, and we see a bunch of like injection holes, but they look more like cyber tech holes.
Are you talking about the confrontation with Udo Kier?
Yes.
Who shows up?
Yes.
I was like, what the hell?
Yeah,
Udo's
for
in
real.
This? Yeah. I love when Udo shows up in just any movie.
Me too. But yeah, I like the way that they use the cyber tech as like this almost like a drug or something.
Now, Jamie, did you catch that was Dina Meyer is the character there?
It's such an insanely stacked cast. It's nuts.
Yeah, so she plays Jane, and she is in all of the first like 3 or 4 Saw movies.
Oh yeah. I knew she looked familiar. Oh, that's awesome.
So it was she comes in here as kind of like one of these sort of like low techs who isn't really as committed to like the Ice-T playing a dude named J-Bone.
Yeah.
Is the leader of the low techs who are the group who is fighting off the corporate control by like becoming sort of like this quasi kind of like cyberpunk Amish community of people who don't actually use computers or anything like that. And so she used to be part of that group. But sort of like Keanu, she believes in sort of like, this individual being able to climb the capitalist ladder where she could get a job and she could change her own personal lifestyle. So she goes to Udo Kier looking for work to be one of the bodyguards, to be a cybernetic, bodyguard for him, because I think that's a cool touch that Udo Kier just has like women cyborgs are just like the strongest people in the given society right now.
Yeah.
And he finds out that her parts are kind of trash, and she's kind of suffering from the black shakes as they put it, which it's kind of depicted as it's functionally it's like this sort of poisonous disease that infects people, but they kind of depict it kind of like almost like a drug addiction on the surface,
right?
That it really hurts people's bodies, and it makes them convulse and until they essentially die. So in terms of writing, it's a fairly well thought through like concept.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Overall, I think Gibson is I don't know, hot take. William Gibson, probably a good writer. I can't say because I haven't read much of his stuff. I've only read one short story and also seen Abel Ferrara's New Rose Hotel. Did you guys know Abel Ferrara made a William Gibson film?
I did know that because I looked it up. I looked up whether William Gibson had written any other movies. I saw that he wrote that one.
Yeah, New Rose Hotel is super sick. It's not futuristic at all because Abel Ferrara didn't give a shit about doing any kind of like sci-fi world building.
Yeah, I was gonna ask.
But essentially Christopher Walken and Willem Dafoe, and Is it Asia Argento? I think is her. I'm trying to remember if that's who it is. They kind of do this idea about kind of like corporate raiders and hitmen, and trying to do sort of like very futuristic corporate espionage and stuff like that, but it's all done in like kind of like the opening scene you see here, where it's like Keanu in like a hotel. So Abel Ferrara depicts it all as like mundane corporate modern spaces and stuff like that. One, so probably he didn't have to get a crazy budget for production design, but two, it also makes kind of like the future kind of just seem boring and kind of sad in a way, and it ends up becoming like this kind of like psychological and existential crisis of the characters wandering this world where all of their relationships with everyone else are just kind of like transactional, and the sparse production design ends up kind of like capturing that. But you also get stuff like Willem Dafoe looking at hazy video images and bank account numbers and, sexy stripper clubs. And it's a very minimalist lo-fi vision of it, but it's still cyberpunk and it's really cool. So, yeah, William Gibson, based on from what I can tell, a very interesting idea-heavy kind of writer. Yeah. And I think that it is the stuff that we see here, even when it's translated into kind of like this more goofy genre chase picture, it's still done, fairly well here. There is stuff on this movie's mind versus Universal Soldier, which we were talking about, is very lean and kind of unpretentious in that way. Yeah. It's very like they don't really the ideas were kind of like secondary, whereas you can tell that Gibson, he cares about some of the story elements in here. And I read up how he kind of feels about this movie. He actually feels more strongly about this movie than I think people realize. I think he had a good time making the film. And he said that, ultimately, some of the seriousness was, undone by some of their budgetary constraints. But the way that he saw it was that it was still this very effective fable of the information age about a guy learning to become human. Yeah, that was how he described it.
I think it is. I mean, I think he did. I think that this movie's reputation is just so it's not justified. I mean, it's
overblown for sure.
Yeah. William Gibson, I think too, is the reason that this movie is like as good as it is. I mean, I think that this is a movie that is very clearly written by him. I don't think if you watch this movie and you are familiar with him, I think you'd know it was written by him. Like, it has his voice so clearly shines through. And it's just, I think you can really tell that he cared about it to some degree while making it, that it wasn't just somebody asked him to make a movie and he was like, I guess. Like, you can tell he really put his all, because there's every scene there's some bizarre idea just like just poking its head in some way. Like, one thing that it just like made me so happy that I love is there's a scene where Jane empties her purse, and in her purse she has a hand grenade that's like a pink plastic hand grenade that's on like her keychain, and it like next to like a troll doll. It's like so like that's just it's incredible. Like, just to throw that in like just out of nowhere is just so nice. There's so much like just detail. Like, it's very writerly, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how to what the word is.
Well, and honestly, I don't think that Longo does a pretty I think Longo does a fine job too of realizing some of this. I like that scene when they because it starts off again in all of kind of like these corporate hotels and things like that, and he goes up Keanu to get this data transfer where he's not being told what the information is, but he's got to store this this gigabytes of information, which we later find out is actually the cure for this NAS epidemic that is affecting the entire world, and but he doesn't know that when he goes into this meeting to do that. And the actual image of like the retro computer tech, like the disk drive calculator and them spinning it and him putting the goggles on and going in, like they do the Jaws shot of the dolly zoom when he gets plugged into the internet. He's like, whoa, yeah. And there's like projection of like Humphrey Bogart on the screen in the background, like behind him, because he's doing obviously kind of like this noir thing as well. And the images and then the download codes for the data are kind of of like these memory images that they do as screenshots,
Yeah.
and they print them out like Polaroids and shit. It reminded me of David Cronenberg's Existence, where he tries to do this very physical rendering of what future like video games would look like. He's like, yeah, you're gonna plug the controller port into a hole in your spine.
Your
Like,
back
obviously,
butt.
it's not what happened, but like it's still cool.
Yeah.
What do
Yeah,
you
I
think of Gibson? Like, you know, he said that he watched the film, and for the most part, I think it seems he liked it. But there were a few things, obviously, that didn't quite work on screen. What did he think he was doing though with the like heroin addicted dolphin? Like, did he think that was gonna not be silly?
I have no
coolest
idea.
thing ever. I don't know what you're
love
talking
it.
about.
No, hey,
yeah,
don't get me wrong. I think it's sick as hell. No one is gonna. I'm not gonna be able to tell anybody that in this movie, eventually, there's a heroin addicted dolphin that's like helping I can't remember exactly what it's doing, but if I say that, you're just gonna be like, "That's a fucking silly movie."
Yeah.
Whatever's going on. You know?
My counterpoint to that is that I think what makes this movie so like I think successful to me is like people. I think cyberpunk, you know, it's so self-serious, but you know, it's punk. You know, it's the same thing with normal punk. Is like, yeah, like you're trying to change the world. You're also a bunch of sweaty guys like wearing leather. Like you know, there's an inherent like kind of silliness to it that I think you have to like. It's like the silliness kind of makes it feel more real, especially in the way that this is. You know, it's not too interested in like being a satire of the future as much as something like, you know, Starship Troopers is, but it still has that element there. And I feel like that's where the telekinetic dolphin comes in, is like, yeah, there's these huge corporations that are crushing everyone. It's very real. It's very fucked up. But like, you know, the future's also just going to be weird as hell. Like stuff that you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And also it's worth noting that, you know, part of it, I think, too, is that it is a, you know, maybe it's not, you know, entirely satirical, but I think part of it, too, is that, like, the story behind the dolphin is that like the Navy chose to train him and shit like that. It's very clearly a decision by the leaders and the corporate powers was to create a telekinetic dolphin to help them control the world in various parts and do hijacking missions and, you know, other things that they wanted it to do. So I think that there's a lot of details through it. I think that one is intentionally treated as a reveal because it's pretty crazy.
Pretty wild, yeah.
But like there are like as Cameron mentioned, there are other things that occur in here. You know, like I think about that's when Keanu like ODs on the data and has to like meditate in order to keep the data from leaking blood out of his nose and shit like that. And then all the people who come in who are trying to like steal the data from him come in like black leather dusters and machine guns, like they're like a western.
I wrote down, they're like Blade cosplayers.
And there's a lot of like just kind of like really crazy shit. I love when he checks in at like whatever like the airport he's going to or whatever, and the government medical machine is like, you have cerebral leakage.
Yeah, he says,
please get that checked out. I just think that, you know, like, you know, as we continue through it, I think the ridiculousness of this premise is kind of like inherent, and some of the goofiness is, you know, done stylistically in the way that, you know, there's just no way of rendering it without some of it coming off like very genre-y in a way.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately it's goofy in kind of like in an endearing way, and it's serious, you know, when it needs to be serious, and it's, you know, sillier when, you know, it doesn't need to be, it doesn't want to be, I think, like super glum about this material either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is a movie that's trying to have a good time as well as have all of these kind of deeper
you don't
philosophies
put Ice-T in that costume if you're not trying to have a good time on some level, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, straight up.
I mean, we haven't talked much about Ice-T, but Ice-T in like the like war paint and dreads and just like dressed like Lawrence Fishburne's character in John Wick, like the King of the Hobos.
Yeah.
That's what he's kind of like dressed like. And he's the leader of the anti-establishment low-techs named J-Bone, and he runs Heaven. Yep. Which is just this crazy like a shipping container that's like hanging off of a crane near a bridge. Like what?
I love the shots of like when they initially go up in the riser, and then it just shows like it's a long shot of just the camera kind of panning over the entire area, and it shows all the like metal bridges that they've made so that they can get to each part of the platform, and yeah, it's a really cool set.
Yeah. No, I think they did a really good job on the. I mean, it's very clear to me this was directed by a production designer.
Yeah,
because there's nothing else to say about this film. Like the sets and the clubs and the makeup and everything.
It's a convincing
it
world.
looks solid.
Yeah. There's one scene where they're in the mall. I forget why they're in the mall, but like what the mall, it's like a mall, but there's no stores. There's just a bunch of like mannequins that are like masking taped into like pillars and just people just walking around, and there's just like every once in a while there's just breaking glass noises in the background, and it's such a perfect like crossroads of like, what the fuck am I looking at? And also like, oh, okay, this is kind of like painting the world for me a little bit, even though it's just like makes no sense at all.
But yeah, I would say that there's like some solid, like a lot of it plays as kind of like a, closer to kind of like a conspiracy thriller a little bit like that. Like there's not a lot of really like crazy set pieces beyond like the really big like climactic set piece, even though when the set pieces do hit, like when they try to chop off Keanu's head like beneath the club, and Udo Kier like betrays him and everything like that, and Jane breaks in and saves him, and they're beating the shit out of them, and like the machine gun fire is like these like automatic hand cannons. Like it's really crazy.
I like the when the Yakuza attacks the heaven thing, like the bridge area that the low-tech stay at. There's this one girl who I don't think she shows up in any part of the movie, but other part of the movie, but she has a giant bazooka, and she's just yelling like motherfuckers and like going crazy as she's trying to kill everybody. And I just found it funny that she had like a moment like that when she really wasn't anybody, just some guard with a bazooka, and then she gets an arrow through her head, which is pretty wild too. But yeah, I found it funny that they paid that much attention to some lowly guard with a giant bazooka.
I love all the weapons in this movie. So many just weird weapons that they use. Like there's there's like the lightsaber whip that the like Yakuza leader uses. There's the low tech guys use like knife throwers and stuff. And like there's I think Jane has like this like thing that's like a nightstick, like it's like this extendable baton thing, but it has like a blade at the end of it. There's like Dolph has like a shepherd's crook and the crucifix knife. Like there's so many just weird just weird weapons. I don't know, I just noticed that when I was watching it.
I really like the way they use the laser wire in the sequence where it's the big attack sequence at the end where just everybody is just trying to infiltrate the low-tech's area, and Keanu is dangling with the other Yakuza leader, not Kitano, but the guard leader, and he
Shinji
gets a hold of his laser wire and wraps it around his head, causing him to be decapitated, and then you get a full shot of the guy's body and head just pummeling to the ground into the water, and I thought that was really, really good, really effective.
I love that too.
The whole climax is honestly pretty sweet.
It is really awesome.
On an action.
They have
they kind of save it because a lot of it is establishing the various forces who are trying to get to Keanu to take his head off for the information that's inside, which again is later revealed to be the cure for this. Which in the Japanese cut, it's kind of made clear that Kitano didn't know that that's what the information was, and that the AI is actually Keanu's mother, who is the co-founder of the company.
Right.
I don't think they mentioned that it's his mother in the American cut, but they say it. They do mention that he doesn't know what. Like it's implied that he didn't know that it was the cure before. And then the AI says something about like starting the company, but never. I don't think it ever says that it's his mother. I could have just missed that.
Like even in the Japanese cut, they even have a little bit more backstory on the AI, which is interesting too. So.
Yeah, they tried to throw some more stuff in there, I guess.
Yeah. It really contextualizes everything, though. So that added 7 minutes makes the narrative better, at least. All the fun stuff is still in the American version, like just the action stuff for the most part. But like it really helps flesh out the characters with the extra 7 minutes.
Yeah, well, and I did just really like the idea that all of this technology surrounding everyone is kind of like poisoning everyone, and it became about this doesn't get the way that they describe it is that the company, this Pharmacom company, they say that it comes from the people getting like cyborg amp jobs. Like they blame it on the individuals for doing drugs is kind of like the idea. They were like, that's what causes it. It's nothing that we do that causes it. And so it's interesting that, eventually Keanu finds out that this world that he's a part of, and he sees the on-the-ground suffering visualized through all of these characters who have this stuff, and he realizes that, that whole time that he's kind of been a part of it. And I love that his immediate reaction isn't like a complete moral breakdown. He's like, oh, God damn it, I have to give up all of my comforts.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's like really upsetting to him, is that, his comforts come at the expense of, this really on-the-ground suffering that he is now, seeing in all of these, very well-designed, again, sort of like sets with the retro digital tech in them and everything, but it's also like a lot of rusty metal and like dirty wet streets and like junkyards and dumpsters and rundown buildings everywhere.
I really like Keanu doing his like big I want room service and I want all the luxuries speech, how he's doing it on top of a junkyard pile, and then in the background you can see the city that he's referencing, just like the skyline. So it's a really good image to express just like where he is and where he wishes he was.
Yeah, so I really like that idea visually of like, he's been brought down to this, this place where, the other, people that he is a part of treat them like garbage, like literal garbage. And then there's the version of, sort of like the futuristic city that's represented in Beijing, even though, again, all of this is shot in like Toronto and Montreal, I'm pretty sure. They just repurpose it as Beijing and Newark, which is really funny. So they had to have done a lot of set work to make that possible.
Yeah.
But then you also have the actual like internet, which is physically, tangibly rendered as like this sort of like Matrix visualization of it.
Yeah.
Before the Matrix.
Have you ever seen the show Reboot? Has anyone ever seen that?
Yes.
It reminds me of that.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Well, what it played to me as was that, obviously in the 90s, there was like a really crummy idea of what VR looked like. But imagine that, but like done as like the 2001 like Stargate sequence with like crazy colors and advertisements and things. Like I imagined that scene where he's flying by all of the colors, but now he's flying by, sort of like corporate ads and things like that. He's navigating.
I literally wrote that down too, the 2001 thing. It totally feels like that. Yeah, just the like crazy light tunnel stuff.
Yeah, I was surprised because when I watched it, people said that it, they thought that it like, I don't know if it's just like Keanu doing like the VR hand gestures or something when he's like, I gotta hack into here and I gotta type in this code here, and like I'm not sure if that's the part that kind of throws people through a bit of a loop. But I thought the actual internet stuff was not anywhere near as bad as what I had read.
Yeah. No, not even close.
I think it's some of the best stuff in the movie. I mean, I don't think
I love the final bit when he's working with the dolphin in the internet.
And the actual
and the dolphin's like exploding information out of its head.
The Johnny figure too, like the CGI balloon man of Johnny Mnemonic, is hilarious. I really got a kick out of that. And also I realized in the I think in the Japanese cut there is more of it actually, slightly more CGI digital craziness. Which is interesting.
Yeah, and I'm really surprised that that's what people get hung up on, because like, maybe some of the aesthetics of what the 2021 internet didn't work out, but like the rest of the story, the business practices, the private healthcare conflict of interest shit, is definitely all still accurate and predictable.
It's also like, again, like, why would you want to see what the internet actually looks like? Why, like, I truly am not able to comprehend the complaint that like, oh, it's too crazy and over the top and weird. Like what do you want to watch? I don't get it. Watch a different movie. Don't watch Cyberpunk.
Like go watch somebody Google something then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I want, somebody taking on the virtual reality headset. He's literally shifting through files by moving his hands, and he's like expanding things. At one point, he's going into a certain like room where there's a virus, and you physically see the virus take over who he's talking to. Like it, like
they try to infect him with a virus.
Yeah, like he starts to shred
I love
away.
that he. Great. Well, yeah, and because he's literally like interrogating someone that he knows only via the computer,
right?
And the guy's represented by like this giant face, like, "Hey, Johnny, what's up, man?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh no, they've sent a virus after us." It's like literally that scene where like, in a thriller, like one character is interrogating another one in the room, and then the bad guys show up and break in and like kill the guy before he can get the answers out of him. It's literally that scene, but rendered in like this really crazy expressionist CG world.
It's wild, man.
Yeah, and then that's all before the big, crazy final set piece, which we've talked about, a little bit. It happens right after Keanu's big freak out about how he wants club sandwiches and cold Mexican beer and hookers. But they literally suspended a 40-ton shipping container from a 60-ton crane, is what I read.
Wow.
And so it was literally 40 or 50 feet in the air. And they had a set piece on top of it. And they said that, like, Robert Longo was saying that he was genuinely, like, terrified that he was going to, like, hurt someone in the making of the film. And he was like, there was one guy who had a scare who was, like, a PA or something. He said that they were pretty safe, but he was very concerned about the whole thing because he never really made a movie before, and they let him build something, like, that big. And again, surrounded by like a bridge and containers and boats and this massive like nighttime junkyard. And then on the inside of that, you have like a war with guns and who is it who shoots is it Ice-T who shoots an arrow into a woman's mouth?
I think that's Ice-T.
In the Japanese,
yeah.
In the Japanese, I'm not sure if that's only in the Japanese cut or not, so I can't say.
That does happen in the American as well, I think. Yeah, and I think it's Ice-T.
Nice. Okay. Nice. But there's a literal ground war happening outside, while inside they have, again, the cyborg dolphin used by the Navy to decrypt data in his head, where the dolphin's going to get the information out of his head, and then they're going to broadcast it using the low-techs, to get everyone the cure, essentially. And it is a really crazy reveal when Ice-T, in his outfit that he's in, he's like, yeah, check out this fucking dolphin.
Yeah,
it's a mammal. Yeah, the Navy got it addicted to heroin, and I got to give it some heroin to, make sure that he's not getting too scared or crazy or nothing. And he's going to do a big infrared scan and broadcast using the antennas. And
I love
the actual effects work to accomplish all of this is pretty good.
Oh, yeah. And I also love when, like, when they finally get everything together and they're about to show everybody and expose the corporation. And he's just like, we're coming at you, low-tech style. So good. I love it.
Dude, well, and I love when they hook him up to the dolphin, and it straight up looks like out of Tetsuo 2.
I was literally going to say that. Yeah. It's
okay. That's awesome.
That room that Jones, the dolphin, is in too is just like I think the dolphin's name is Jones, right?
It's named Jones.
So.
Yeah.
It's like that pillar of like flickering TV screens in the middle of the room, like. It's just like, I think it's so cool looking. Yeah, and that giant just rig that comes down from the ceiling that they strap Keanu's head into. It's just so, it's so visually just like exciting.
Yeah, there's so much tech detail. Like when you look in the background, there's hundreds of televisions and wires going everywhere, and like a very detailed set. It's incredibly detailed. Love that.
Yeah, and I love seeing everyone just in a single room. Like the Yakuza's after him, Kitano's after him. Dolph shows up and he's like, Jesus is waiting.
His death is pretty brutal too.
Just literally beating the shit out of Keanu in front of the cyborg dolphin. And he's talking about the holiest of communions. If I have this, I'll be God.
Yeah. And then they have...
because the dolphin kills him, right? He kills him with like the sonic pressure.
I think
on his cybernetic body upgrades, and he just catches fire and burns to a crisp.
Yeah. Is it? I'm remembering it as it's like it's the dolphin's psychic waves, but the girl is the one that points the satellite at Dolph. Am I correct in saying that?
Right. I think that's right.
Yeah,
I think that's
and
right.
Dolph's death is pretty, like, he gets radiated and he's melting, basically.
Oh, he gets charred.
Yeah, it's wild, man. And then they have the shot of his charred body just hitting the ground, and like some of the pieces kind of fall off and stuff. It's good.
Yeah.
This sequence also has, I think, one of like the best lines of dialogue I've ever heard in a movie, which is, "You're gonna have to hack your own brain."
That's sick.
Yeah. So yeah, it's so good, so cool.
Yeah, and that's literally what's happening in the scene. Is you just have like Ice-T fending off the Yakuza who have like laser wires and machine hand cannons. And then you have Takeshi Kitano showing up and having a big change of heart, which it sounds like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the American cut, but in the Japanese cut, it actually makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So there's an even better version of that dramatic beat taking place that might even make the movie work even more for you if you haven't seen the Japanese cut of it. And it's actually like I was surprised when I heard that, because like that's the big emotional core.
I was shocked when I saw that.
Yeah, is him coming to the realization that his daughter is now this, it's not this flesh human person. It's now just this image hologram in his computer, and he wishes nothing more than to have the human version of it back. And he realizes that the entire that's on a larger, broader, metaphorical level, that's what his company has done to the world. Is it's made them all reliant on these things that are going to kill them and turn them into images and computers and stuff. So his change of heart makes perfect dramatic sense in that moment where he's like, I don't want that to happen anymore. And they get the information out, and they broadcast it out and everything like that.
Yeah. They broadcast it. It's like they have a scene when they're broadcasting it. Like there's a bunch of people in like a city square gathered around this stack of TVs that's shaped like a cross. That's like flashing the cure on screen. Very cool. Like just set that's just there for like a few seconds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I like that last shot too of them standing in like the junkyard area, looking over at the city as the corporation just like burns down.
Yeah, that's so funny. It just catches on fire when they broadcast the cure. I don't know.
I don't know what the fuck happened there, but that's awesome.
What's interesting too is the in the American cut they do the same thing where the building is on fire and they fade away, but in the American cut they have Johnny and the girl in like kind of looking at each other and it in the background, and then they look onward, whereas in the Japanese cut it's actually just an image of the building on fire as opposed to like those two characters looking at it. So it seemed like in the Japanese version they wanted to focus less on like this possible developed relationship that Johnny has with this girl and more on just like the corporation has been taken over and we've solved the plague and all that. Or
I think that
plague.
I like that better. I think that the relationship does kind of feel shoehorned in. It definitely does feel like
I agree.
Yeah. This, but this also ends with I think one of the best fake out endings.
Oh yeah,
one where they have a close up. Yeah, they have a close up of Dolph the cyborg's like body on the ground. And it starts to like kind of move and like move forward a little bit.
Right,
and you're like, oh shit, and then.
It's like the Universal Soldier thing. You think he's coming back.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Ice-T says, that's just garbage. Get it out of here. And you see that he was just actually in like a crane and he gets thrown down off of heaven.
Yeah, and they show the body
really
just
cool.
like fly from the platform and crash into the water. The whole shot. Yeah. It's great.
Well, I think
that's pretty much it.
That is how Johnny Mnemonic ends. So maybe entering reductive rating round on Johnny Mnemonic. This also gets honestly like a solid 4 from me. I'm surprised that maybe I guess because my first run with it too was what sounds like the cut that emphasized some of this stuff a little bit better too. But I honestly, despite the fact that there's some goofy elements in it, again, kind of as we mentioned at the top, I thought that the ambition completely outweighed that. And I always like anyone who's going to attempt to do cyberpunk noir kind of stuff. That's just cool idea in general. And to do it here in this kind of like, very well production designed kind of like chase movie kind of idea where once again, you Keanu Reeves, and your head is going to get chopped off by either Takeshi Kitano's Yakuza goons or a psycho cyborg preacher Dolph Lundgren, because you have 300 gigabytes of data in your head that is going to tell the world how capitalism is literally poisoning their bodies. And I loved that detail too. I don't remember if we got to the scene where he says it, but that he has deleted childhood memories in order to store it in his skull.
Yeah.
That's such like a very writerly way at getting this idea that Keanu is like literally, like this corporate tool.
Yeah,
who,
sacrificing himself as a human.
Yeah, he's literally sacrificing his own memories to store, just data in his head. So to watch the story of this guy who is this corporate tool, then come back to humanity in the same way that also Takeshi Kitano's Megacorp owner, who's realized his business has dehumanized the world and thus himself, and realized that just in time, and that the person who should be the most natural human man you would think would be the religious man.
Yeah.
In fact, he's the most brutal and unnatural in the film, and Dolph is really he gets to do just the hamminess. That's all he gets to do. He doesn't even have much of a character. He just gets to have a lot of fun on screen, which is awesome to see as well. But then, you throw in the underground network of Amish punks led by Ice-T, the heroin-addicted codebreaker Dolphin, who's going to decrypt all the data. And this whole thing just filled with strange style details and, this sort of like the pristine corporate future space versus the dilapidated like punk grotesquerie ones, and all that suffering in order to make that possible. I think this is a decently, thought through, cyber noir kind of story, and it's well realized. I really did like the 2001 Stargate sequence meets crummy 90s VR look for the internet, even if it's not what the internet ended up looking like.
A shame.
The 90s were a time. I'm sorry. It's just, it's what they, I also feel this way similarly about another movie from the 90s that I don't think people like very much, that is just absolutely insane, and that's The Devil's Advocate.
Oh, yeah. I got to rewatch that. I liked it a lot.
We watched it on a 35mm print,
right.
Jamie. I can't remember what it played at. It was The Exorcist and Devil's Advocate 35mm double feature. Such a weird
so
double feature. Good. But it was another thing that I watched that and I was like, okay, so people's problem with this movie is that Al Pacino is literally the devil, and Satan and Keanu Reeves is literally his legal attorney.
Yeah.
Like that was people's issue with the film, and for me that is absolutely a feature, and I feel the exact same way about this. Anything that people took issue with that I could find in all of the writing that I found is I was like, that honestly
that's
is
why
what
I
made
like
this
it.
fun for me. Yeah. And again, it has all that futuristic aesthetic infected by, all of the, modern sort of like political ills, and I think Gibson thought it through fairly well. So solid 4 for me.
Yeah, I would give it. I would probably give the American version a 3. I still think it's good. It's just really missing some of the character stuff that I think fully contextualizes things that happen, especially in the last 30 minutes or so. The Japanese version I would give 4. This is, I would say, this is like, it doesn't pull off everything I think it was trying to do perfectly, but the ambition I can't do anything but respect. The amount of ideas here in this kind of like cyberpunk setting is unbelievable. I mean, aside from just the heroin addicted dolphin, you have things like the weaponry that they use, like the laser sword. I like even though it's kind of dumb because we know about the cloud storage, I still do like the idea of people taking on like corporate data physically in their brain, and in order to do so, you have to
honestly, I just
out...
think that's sick. My brain instantly did not go to that place at all. I'm surprised that people's brains did.
Yeah.
That it was like, it was just like, oh no, anything that makes like the digital stuff like fleshy and tangible works so much better on film.
Yeah.
So this idea of him being a data courier as like a meat sack is awesome.
Yeah. And the thing is even as I was watching it, especially the first time, the cloud storage thing didn't pop into my head. It was just more of an afterthought. So I will say that the film is convincing. Like it's incredibly convincing film when it comes to making you believe that this world is something that could be real and tangible. So I there's just an insane amount of creativity involved in this, and I really, really appreciate what they attempted to do, and for the most part, I think they succeeded. I do wish that maybe they had more of a budget. They probably could have pulled these things off a little better. But even the charm of the CGI internet is great. So I almost wouldn't even want that to look better. I like balloon Keanu Reeves. So 4 out of 5 for the Japanese and 3 out of 5 for the American cut.
Cool. For you, Cameron.
Yeah, I would rate. I only saw the American cut, but I would rate it a solid 4 for me. So I am very excited to check out the Japanese cut because, I think the issues that I do have with it are, some of that. I think that ending change of heart doesn't make too much sense in the American cut. I also think, it's it just has a ton of ideas, and it maybe its focus is kind of just throwing out ideas for a lot of it, which is like, I love the ideas. They're awesome. But I think it could have done with maybe like another set piece in the middle or something, something to break it up a little more. Cause there are some stretches where you're like, okay. But I mean, overall, I love it. I think it's really unfairly reviled. I think a lot of the goofiness that people complain about, I feel like is, it's not the MST 3K style of like brainless, bizarre decisions. I think it feels very thought out. It feels very Starship Troopers-esque. It's very it's a story about how crazy the future is. It's not a boring, sleek future. It's a very weird future that's kind of bursting with all these crazy details. And honestly, I think that the world building in this movie, I don't know that I've seen another movie that does it quite like this. Like, there's so much stuff that's just I get like clamoring for space almost. There's almost too much going on.
Yeah, because they never really even focus a lot on these cool things. It's just stuff that you see in passing or whatever.
Exactly.
It's all just like surreal detail.
Yeah, like even like
that just builds and builds and builds.
The enhancement, the cyborg enhancement stuff is like, it's treated as like this big plot point thing, but it doesn't really enter into the plot at all beyond just being like a plot device. You know what I mean? Like, it's very, there's at times, I mean, it's a little overcrowded, but I think that's kind of its biggest strength in a lot of ways, is how overcrowded it is with just ideas.
Well, I think that will wrap it up for everything this week. That was Universal Soldier from 1992 and Johnny Mnemonic from 1995. Thanks so much, Cameron, for joining us and talking about some Dolph Lundgren hanging out in some science fiction films.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
No problem. If you've got anything to plug while you're here, this is where we have you do that.
So I do a podcast called Podcast About List. It's a comedy podcast, pretty silly. And also, if you like Johnny Mnemonic, we do on our Patreon at the $10 tier, we do like comedy Dungeons and Dragons. We drop an episode every 2 weeks, and our like main campaign that we kind of there's other stuff peppered in, but our main one is a comedy cyberpunk kind of storyline, which I think has a lot in common with Johnny Mnemonic. So if that kind of stuff interests you, I would recommend checking it out.
Nice, that's awesome.
Well, for our listeners, we are going to be back in 1 week's time, where we are going to be talking about, we're going to be wrapping up Dolph month here. We're going to be talking about Silent Trigger from 1996, directed by Russell Mulcahy, which, in my opinion, one of the biggest surprises of Dolph month. Because I picked it just because it was a movie that came out in 96 and it had Dolph Lundgren and a tower and a sniper. And I was like, okay, this is some sort of pulp military thing where he's a sniper or something. And it ended up being like a strangely existential like war romance about these killers who don't want to be killers anymore and just want to have sex with each other in this unfinished tower while everything around them just gets uglier and grosser, and it has some of the craziest gore in any Dolph film that we're going to be talking about somehow. And directed by Russell Mulcahy, who directed the Highlander and Razorback, the Australian killer boar film.
He always brings a very larger than life quality to his films. So, and he does it here.
Yeah, and did some of the he did like Duran Duran and Elton John music videos in the 80s, and very visually stylish film, and very excited to talk about that next week. And then we're going to be pairing that with the last film in Dolph Month, Blackjack from 1998, directed by John Woo.
Oh boy,
you might have heard of him. It was one of the few John Woo films that I haven't seen. And it turns out it's because it was a failed TV pilot that they turned into a film. And there was supposed to be this show starring Dolph Lundgren as a former U.S. Marshal turned bodyguard who
also a magician?
who's also a magician. He's very good with playing cards. He throws them at people and cuts their face with them.
Whoa.
He uses them to cut rope and get out of situations that he's in. He also balances being a new father of a child of a friend who just dropped him a child because his friend dies.
Yep.
And so he's a bodyguard who's doing John Woo level action set pieces, including sliding over and under dirt bikes that are exploding while he's dual wielding.
Yep.
He dual wields while jumping on a trampoline and a house explodes behind him.
Wow, I gotta check this out. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, and
it's pretty
the
good.
Craziest part of the whole thing is that Dolph Lundgren's character, his main character trait that they were going to create seasons of arcs out of, is that he has a phobia for the color white. And it's a huge plot point.
The biggest.
He has
awesome.
to wear the cool action star sunglasses because it turns the colors
Oh my God.
white into the colors of his sunglasses. So he has to wear sunglasses all the time, or else he'll have sensory overload and faint due to the color white. And yes, that results in the villain of the film exploiting that by trying to fight with him in pools of milk.
It's wild, dude.
Oh yeah. Okay, that's a must watch.
Yeah, it's worth it for the action beats alone, for sure.
So
Won't
an
spoil anything,
absolutely
but yeah.
insane movie that was meant to be a television show written by the guy who wrote the Miami Vice television show, directed by John Woo, and the action set pieces are great.
Yeah, really good.
So that's going to be the bonus episode next week over on patreon.com. That's what we're going to be talking about, wrapping up Dolph Month with two heavy hitters. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be moving on from Dolph Month. We're going to go back to regular scheduled programming, and we're going to be back with a special guest talking about Across 110th Street, which is a blaxploitation film I haven't seen.
Yeah.
But I imagine that is where the song that Tarantino stole from Jackie Brown comes from.
Yeah, probably.
And then we're going to be pairing that with a film called Donnie Brasco, which is another crime film people might be familiar with Pacino and Johnny Depp and Michael Madsen, I think, are in that one. But yes, we're going to be back with a special guest doing those films shortly after. But yeah, that being said, I think that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much, guys, for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.
Yes.